What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? You're watching SkepTalk here on the line. It's June 3rd, 2024, and the lines are open if you'd like to, or if you have a question you'd like to call in about whether or not God exists, whether aliens are really demons, or whether we have evidence that Jesus definitely exists. You can call in at 720-619-2288 if you're calling from the US, or if you're calling from outside of the United States, you can call you can use the link in the description to call over the internet. I'm the Godless Engineer, or John Gleason, and joining me today is Aron Adair. Aron, you want to say hi to everybody?
Hello, hello. Aron here again. Glad to be back on SkepTalk.
Yeah, I mean, in case anybody doesn't know, don't you have books about aliens and stuff? I feel like, and stars. You got books on aliens and stars.
Everyone's got those these days. Everyone's written an alien book by now. I guess slightly more serious. I've co-authored a book with Jonathan M.S. Pierce about aliens and religion. The book is Aliens and Religion, Where Two Worlds Collide. What are the theological ramifications if aliens exist, along with how likely is it that aliens are out there and poking at us these days?
Yeah, and over there on another channel that likes to have Jimmy Akin on, he was talking about some aliens and demons kind of stuff. So I think that we're probably, we might have a show in the future covering some of that. I know you took a look at the stream and was like, there's some stuff that we could address at the very beginning if you're interested. So I got to go through and parse that. But tonight we are taking calls from anybody that wants to call in about whether or not God exists or any other questions that you might have for two atheists. And we do have some callers that have already started to call in. We will be giving preference to, religiously affiliated people, or theistically. Maybe I should say theistically or deistically. Just people that are not atheists, we will probably prefer to take calls from them first, but that doesn't mean that if you're an atheist, you won't get any kind of action out of us tonight. More than likely you will. Let's see. Let me check my script here. We are going to jump to calls here in just a minute, but I do want to remind everybody that you all should support the line here. And one way that you can support it is to send in super chats. Any super chat over $5 we will be addressing at the end of the show. So if you don't want to call in, but you still have a question that you would like us to interact with, you can send in a super chat of $5 or more, and we will interact with your question. We'd really appreciate it if you guys would call in and or not call in. Sorry, we appreciate you calling in, but also send a super chat if you don't want to, or in addition to calling in. Yeah, I got there eventually. Thank you, hun. But anyways, Aron, do you want to go ahead and take our first call here?
Absolutely. Let's get started with this. Yeah.
All right, awesome. We're able to get started right away, so I'm pretty excited about that. We're going to go to Gustani. I'm sorry, you're going to have to tell us how to pronounce your name.
Oh, well, you butchered it, brother. You butchered it. It's Justiniani.
Justiniani. I am from Alabama, bro. I can pronounce the name Blake. That's pretty much the extent.
It's just Justin with Yanni at the end.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. So what you want to talk about?
Oh man. So I mean, first of all, I just kind of want to prove the existence of my gods, right? So what I'm suggesting is that my gods, right, are the governing forces of the universe. Okay? Like gravity, like the elements and things. These are my gods. Well,
okay.
And that basically, modern science is I challenge the foundations of modern science. I'm very skeptical of it.
Okay. All right. Can you maybe clear, make some? Go ahead.
Yeah. Just to be clear, so when you say Are you saying gravity is a god, or there is a god that controls the force of gravity?
Precisely. Exactly. like the different like forces of the universe that are unchanging, unmoved, the same always will be. Those are the gods because they're unchanging.
Okay. What are your gods' names?
So I'm a Roman pagan, so we have different, there's many different names, Mars, Mercury, Saturn, all the names.
Okay. I don't know. I know, Aaron, you kind of jumped in first. Do you have any initial thoughts here?
Well, I guess just a starting point, there was a statement that the gods are unchanging. And especially if we're taking this from the various stories about the gods, about Zeus or Eupator or any of the other gods with whatever pronunciation we want to go with, they're pretty fickle and they change their minds and they have regrets and they don't seem like much in the way of constants, not to mention the origins of the god stories that we have from Hesiod. It's, you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Sorry.
Okay, all right. Just need to make sure if we need to call 911, all right?
No, everything's all right.
Okay, just making sure. All right. Like I say, most of the stories we have about the gods is them having their own creation stories, having fights between each other, changing their minds and things like that. So I guess why associate the gods of the Greeks and Romans and other ancient peoples with the law of gravity? It seems like a pretty bad
I think because that's certainly how they perceived them, right? Like Poseidon, he wasn't the god of the underworld, was he? No, he was the god of the ocean and the waters. Just like how Zeus, he was the god of the gods, right? He's not the god of plants and vegetables.
Hold on. Can we stop right there real quick? Let's take Poseidon, okay? What is your evidence that Poseidon actually exists and controls the seas?
Oh, I'm a Roman pagan. I don't believe in Poseidon.
Why are we talking about Poseidon then? You said that your gods have
many names. Example of how. Well, I'm just using an example. You were talking about how the Romans and the Greeks, these gods were acting different, and they changed or whatever else. I'm just letting you know. Okay, we could use the example of the Greeks.
Okay, what is your version of Poseidon? Do you have a version of Poseidon that exists?
Yeah, Jupiter. Yeah.
Okay, so Jupiter. What evidence do you have that Jupiter exists and controls the oceans?
Okay, but here's the thing: the evidence that exists are self-evident. We know these things exist. It's just now you're having difficulty with the fact that I'm defining these things as different gods, and that's what we really need to talk about here.
I'm really not having a difficulty whatsoever here. All I'm asking you is literally what evidence do you have that suggests that Jupiter exists and controls the oceans or whatever other kind of attributes you assigned to Jupiter?
Let me answer that question with a question.
No, answer the question with an answer. No, answer the question.
Answer that question with a question. It's a fair thing to do.
No, I asked you a question. You can give me an answer. I swear to fucking Christ.
No, I think you have a burden of proof.
No, you're muted. Okay, listen. I'm just simply not going. I'm going to give you one chance. Okay, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to give you one chance. If you come back with a fucking question instead of a goddamn answer, I will drop you like a fucking bad habit, okay? So give me an answer to the question that I asked you, okay? All right, I'm going to unmute you now. Go.
I hope Zeus strikes me down.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I hope Zeus, the god of thunder.
Okay.
Okay, but I'm high. I'm high.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He
dropped.
He might have said he's high. Okay. I think he might have said he's high. And okay. I'm going to also note that if Zeus, I'm going to have to note though, if Zeus controls lightning and he's out to get me, it's pretty darn ridiculous though that I can defeat Zeus with a lightning rod, or I can just sit in my car and he can strike it as many times as he wants. It always is a fundamentally interesting thing when you assign the gods as forces of nature, but also want them to get you, and we can get back at them by understanding how nature works better than these alleged gods.
All right, so off to a great start tonight. I don't know if that guy was serious, but we are going to take an atheist call next. But before we take an atheist call, I do want to promote the Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/call the line, you can help support us here at the line. We would really appreciate being able to continue all of this great work that we do and providing opportunities to talk with real atheists. So please consider joining us over there on patreon.com/call the line. And then we have a number of shows coming up this week. We've got Chewed Gum tomorrow night at 6 p.m. with Arden Hart and Stacy. And then we've got on Wednesday, The Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty and Mandisa Thomas. And then on Thursday at 2 p.m. Central, we've got Takis with Arden, Hart, and Josie. And then on Sunday, we've got our 2 shows going down. And the first show, the Sunday show, is at 4 p.m. Apparently 4 p.m. With Matt Dillahunty and Eric. And then at 7 p.m., it's Aron and me. And then Monday, we've got SkepTalk with Erika and guests to be determined. So we got a lot of great stuff coming up here. If you don't know, you can, if you support us on Patreon memberships or anything like that, you get access to a podcast. It's hosted by Jimmy Snow, and each episode, at least once a week, is... he calls another creator and has an impromptu discussion and gives them a quiz, which if they ace, they win a prize on behalf of a patron that it goes to. Episodes go out to patrons first, and only patrons can win prizes and leave comments, which are read on the air. Free patrons and Discord only patrons get the show 2 weeks later. And then the YouTube channel members get it on a delay after that. So let's see, there are 2 or more episodes out so far. I'm not exactly sure which one. But with Apostasy and Eve Was Frame, and it's the greatest podcast alive, apparently. So if you want to get the podcast, become a member. Also, I'm not a very good salesperson, so keep that in mind. Anyways, are you ready to get into the next call? We do have all lines open except for the one that we are about to take. So if you have a question you want to ask us, please call in, and we would love to hear what you guys, have to talk to us about.
Yeah, can you defend gravity as a god better than our previous caller? The option is yours.
Yeah, totally. All right, Paul, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, gentlemen?
Doing pretty good. How you doing, Paul?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. It's another day in Alabama, so. So my question is for Dr. Adair. Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I admit that I could be completely clueless about the superposition, but I'm going to ask the question and see what you got for me. Does the superposition, does it violate the law of non-contradiction?
I certainly hope not. Otherwise, logic is completely effed. All superposition is basically all the possible effects are added on top of each other. In fact, the most simple form of superposition isn't even from quantum mechanics. It's actually what you learn in even high school physics. So if you're in high school physics class, one of the things you'll be asked to do is draw a free body diagram. What are all the forces acting on whatever block you're looking at? And all those forces that add together, that's literally, you're looking at the superposition of all the forces, the sum of all the forces acting together. What is superposition in quantum mechanics? It's all of the states that could possibly exist all being added together.
But are they happening is that happening at the same time? And I'm thinking in terms of Schrodinger's, I always mess his name up, the cat, where it's both alive and dead at the same time. Until you visualize it.
That it's in some sort of state of both at the same time until observed. And more broadly, it's that, hey, you're looking at the position of a particle, and that the particle doesn't take a definite position until observed. That's the general way of putting it. So I would say the way it avoids the problem of non-contradiction is that we're not saying the cat is dead or alive, is that the cat won't take that state until observed. The electron won't take a position until observed. Before that, it's in a possible range of where it could be. That's one way of interpreting it that doesn't actually sound like straight up exist and not exist at the same time.
No, I get it. When you said that the possible portion, where it's almost like it's none of them until you visualize it, until you can see it, that makes perfect sense to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And one other way that it can also be interpreted to try to kind of avoid the idea, and especially because like the idea of like the collapse of the wave function is one of the earlier terms for what's going on. If you take, for example, the many worlds interpretation, all those possible states that a quantum system can be in all exist. And that's another way of saying, hey, there's no contradiction. All the possibilities exist just in basically separate universes, separate causal connections in that sort of way. So those are the ways that at least I would look and say, here's a way of coherently interpreting quantum mechanics.
That's good. I really appreciate it because it was kind of throwing me off. But yeah, you explained it well, and I got it. I appreciate it.
If quantum mechanics doesn't throw you off, you haven't studied it enough yet.
Well, I'm still a baby, but I mean, just understanding the basic concept of what it supposed to mean or whatever, and then understanding logic, the basic concept, it seemed like it was a contradiction, but you explained it perfectly. So, yep.
I get the feeling that's probably not your only question. Oh, okay.
No. Actually, that was it. Yeah, most of the time I can figure them out. I figure things out, and I only call if I'm just stumped. So most of the stuff I can figure out on my own. Yeah, that was pretty good.
All right, cool. Can I ask what hobby it is that has you looking at interpretations of quantum mechanics?
Well, I just like to study a variety of things. So I do everything from logic to science to you name it, and I study it or whatever. And so it's just when I came into it, I think it hit me when I was sleeping or whatever. Don't ask me why I was thinking about the law of non-contradiction while I was sleeping. But then at the same time, the superposition came in, and my understanding was it is a position and not that position at the same time. And so I thought those two were in contradiction, and that's why I decided to call. So, yeah, I just like to learn a bunch of stuff. I always got a book in my hand, and I'm always learning something. Yep.
All right. Well, we definitely want to encourage continuous learning, and I got shit more to learn myself. It's almost like there's a whole universe for me to explore out there. So I'm glad I got
almost. Yeah.
Awesome, Paul.
All right, gentlemen,
I'm so glad that you called in.
All right, thank you much. And you guys take care.
All right, see you later, Paul.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye. You too.
All right. Well, that was Paul. So glad for him to call in. So we've got all lines open if y'all would like to call in and talk with us about anything that you want to talk about. Something I haven't talked about in a while is the historicity of Jesus. I know that a lot of atheists like to call in, and for whatever reason, this is a pretty big there's a pretty big divide in the atheist community about the historicity of Jesus, because there's obviously people out there that think that Jesus is like a historical figure, just the Gospels and everything are mythologies. Aron, what's your take on this particular aspect of I guess biblical studies, like the study of the historical Jesus?
I'm going to say best case scenario, man, is this such a mess. The sources we have obviously are far from ideal in the fact that they're from, if we're talking about the Gospels, these are unknown authors following literary traditions, copying and contradicting each other at will, not even just accidentally, like literally willing said, I don't like how this story is, so I'm going to change it. I'm going to add this. We're in some sort of sectarian fight about something, so we're going to, put these words in Jesus' mouth to, denigrate the other side. It's like, this is the exact opposite of what you want to even know if there's any kernel of history to that. Honestly, if there was an historical Jesus, he is so difficult to reach us. And I would say the reason it's so difficult is scholars have been trying for over 200 years. And what's the ultimate agreement? It's a lot of, I would say on average, the answer is kind of a shoulder shrug. There was probably a guy and he did something that got him killed. That's probably the broadest consensus. And man, does that leave a lot to be desired. And of course, how you're going to really come down to the side, I think ultimately is how you're going to interpret our oldest source, Paul, because he thinks Jesus wasn't just a swell dude, but he was basically sent literally from heaven, come down to earth, had some sort of divine status from early on, not the same as God, not the Trinity or something like that, but basically an angelic being come down to earth and then returning. This is not the normal thing you'd expect. And the fact that's our earliest source is at least surprising on there was a dude theory.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, obviously, some people are going to push back and say that, well, we've got several, indications that Jesus existed, in non-biblical texts. Like, there's Josephus, there's Pliny the Younger, and all this other stuff. What do you think about the sources for Jesus, like outside of New Testament material?
Assuming they're all authentic, and if we just take as a premise what is in Josephus at least resembles something he originally wrote, because there's a whole lot of argument about what, if anything, he wrote about Jesus. With Tacitus, with Pliny the Younger, if we just accept them on their face value that something was written by these people, it leaves us with the question: are they just repeating what Christians have already been saying, and there's nothing independent in the first place? If Josephus is just basically hearing about these Christians and then repeating back the sorts of things that they have said about Jesus, then it's not an independent witness. At best, it can just say, here are the sorts of stories that are being told in the late 90s AD. That's still several decades after the time of Jesus. It's decades after the possible timing of the writing of the Gospel of Mark, the first gospel. It's hard to then peel back from that because you're still going through the same ultimate Christian filters. We would have to know, is there some way that Josephus had independent knowledge of what was going on? If we had that, it would be a whole new story. But the fact that we can't show that, and I would say the evidence is that this text in Josephus about Jesus is at the very least doctored, if not completely invented. We can't really use it for evidence of much of anything. I'll also note one other thing as well. There was a recent article, which journal was it in? I'm forgetting. I think it was the Journal of Early Christian History. I'm forgetting exactly which, but the author basically was looking at the other passage from Josephus about James, the brother of Jesus. And then there's this phrase that says, him called the Christ in Greek, is that equivalent? And saying, hey, this is talking about Jesus having a brother who was then killed. And the author of this article basically agrees with a previous argument by Richard Carrier that this is probably interpolation. And if you take it as an interpolation, the story of how James the brother of Jesus, was killed makes a whole lot more sense, because there's a story of this James being killed in Josephus, and there's also the story of James, Jesus' brother, being killed in Hegesippus that don't really match all that well. One is taking place before the Jewish War. One is taking place towards the end of the Jewish War. There are a lot of differences, like how that James died, for what circumstances, things like that. And this author agrees, it's like, hey, this looks like an interpolation. And if we take that, now the James tradition makes a whole lot more sense. So in some ways, I look at the historicity debate and realize if we follow the evidence where it goes, more things kind of click into place rather than trying to force some original guy behind the story to make it all work together. That is honestly a lot of reconstruction of what needs to be there rather than what we can demonstrate to be there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm guessing that you're talking about, is it Nicholas List, The Death of James the Just Revisited? Is that the article that you're talking about?
Thank you for looking that up. Now that you said the name, it rings a bell or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, because
Yeah,
that's the one that I've been reading today.
Cutting-edge scholarship, cutting-edge publications coming to this sort of conclusion, saying, hey, if we assume interpolation, it makes more sense. Leaving it as interpolation, we're scratching your head about not just how Josephus's texts work, where it seems strange, but this other tradition that it now seems strange. If you separate the two and say, this was a marginal note, problem solved.
Yeah, totally agree. And with this new paper, it's actually in the Journal of Early Christian Studies. It's called "The Death of James the Just," revisited by Nicholas List, and he's got a pretty good like bibliography or like citation list there that supports all of his conclusions and everything. So. I definitely think people should check that out if they have the ability to, but it's hidden behind a paywall right now. So if you're not really interested in it, I don't expect you to get it. But basically, what Aaron said, this comes to the same conclusion that Richard Carrier comes to. And let's see, is it he put this forth in Hitler, Homer, Bible, Christ, I believe, in his paper.
That's just where it was. No, that was where it was republished. It was originally in a peer-reviewed journal, but that book by Carrier is a collection of all of his peer-reviewed papers. So it's an anthology rather than his original publication.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's there, but it also makes appearance in the question or the historicity of Jesus. Why we might have reason for doubt. Now, as far as like the extra sources, I guess. Like I find them to be pretty underwhelming in my opinion. Like they're the extra biblical sources are pretty underwhelming. That's why I generally focus on Paul's work. Paul's vague verses about Jesus seem to be the best evidence for Jesus existing. And the reason why is because Paul is so vague about what he means in certain verses, like when he talks about Jesus having a brother named James, or any of the other verses, discussing, things that could be historically accurate about like a real historical Jesus. What do you think about the passages in Paul there, Aaron?
Well, the passages you're talking about, we're only talking basically a handful. We're talking about Galatians 4 that seems to say Jesus was born of a woman, which, how descriptive. Find someone who isn't born of woman, other than the one line from Shakespeare in Macbeth about, I'm actually was born cesarean, so that's why I get to kill you, Ra. Besides that kind of exception, everyone is born of woman, right? So it's like, what's that doing there? What's that supposed to mean? There is the part in Romans 1 where it says Jesus was of the seed of David by the flesh, but created by God in spirit. I forget the exact wording. I have to triple check that. And then the thing in Galatians 1 about Paul going down and meeting James, the brother of the Lord. In that case, implying Jesus is the brother being talked about there. And first impressions, you would read that and say, yeah, clearly he's talking about a dude. But we have to back up because one, for example, the whole brother of the Lord business, the problem is all Christians are in fictive kinship. They're all brothers and sisters. So there is that inherent ambiguity just with that. Now, conversely, imagine if Paul said, I went down and I met Peter and I met Mary, the mother of Jesus, or the mother of the Lord. There's no fictive kinship in where someone is a mother that we can point to. At least I don't know of any examples. So if that were in there, there'd be a whole nother story, wouldn't it? I think that would, make me say, okay, then clearly this is what Paul thought. Paul is the earliest writer and thinks he's a human. Then we don't really have any other good justification there. So that's, evidence we could have had, we don't, and instead we have this ambiguous statement. The thing also where it seems to say in Galatians 4, where Jesus is born of a woman, the thing is this is part of a longer discussion by Paul, where basically he's talking about who this woman is, or actually women, because he's talking about the two partners of Abraham, Sarah and Hagar, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, Sarah and Hagar.
Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, when I hear Hagar, I think Hagar the Horrible from comic strips, and I don't want to get those two confused. But But basically, it's like, hey, this seems to be part of this longer discussion, dialogue, and difference between the heavenly woman, the earthly woman, the heavenly promise, and the earthly law, this sort of thing that Paul seems to be setting up and saying, because Jesus took on the one form, so that way we could have access to the other heavenly woman, which he even explicitly says in this whole thing, this is a parable, this is a metaphor. It should make us say, hey, we need to read that metaphorically. Because again, otherwise, why the halibut is Paul going along and saying, by the way, he was born? It's like, who are you trying to convince here, Paul? What? Why? This is about as useful as telling me the sun rises in the east, because, like, yeah, we know that. You're not really telling us anything new there. Lastly, then, I mentioned as well Galatians 1:1-3 about Jesus being the sperm of David. That's probably the most difficult to explain on a mythicist model. And is where Carrier has to spend the most work there to explain how that could be possible. And this is where I've actually done some digging myself, and Richard and I have had actually a little bit of back and forth. He doesn't necessarily agree with me, but I've found another example of a heavenly Messiah who is a son of David, who is supposed to be of the sperm of David, but also pre-existent and has never been seen by humans, but will come down basically in the last days. This is in 4th Ezra.
Okay.
When Richard and I are disagreeing, the thing we're disagreeing about is basically, is this actually an authentic Jewish source, or is there Christian interpolation? And at least when I've looked at the research, no one has suggested, as far as I can tell, or put a case that this is something a Christian interpolator has. So this would be a Jewish apocalyptic writing. This is written roughly in the same time as the Book of Revelation was, like in the 90s, more or less, AD. And it imagines a Davidic Messiah who is heavenly, has always been in heaven, who has always been hidden until the last days, when he finally comes down, kicks butt, and lives for 400 years until the final destruction of the world. That sure sounds like not a normal human dude. And if that is a possibility in the Jewish imagination, that you can have a heavenly Davidic, why can't Jesus be the same thing? It doesn't necessarily require sperm of David to equal must be human, because this is also in the Jewish milieu at that time.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure about your disagreement with Carrier and all of that. I haven't really looked into that too much, but as far as the verses in Paul go, I think that they're just way too vague to land on either side of it. But I mean, I feel like that means that it's definitely not. It's definitely not evidence that Jesus existed, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
at the very least, Paul could have said things that were clear. Like I said, I met his mother. All right, we're done.
Right.
I met his alleged father. Boom.
Right.
It's like, hey, we now see that there's evidence of virgin birth stuff being claimed early on, and there's a human involved, and that is hey, the things that we really wish we could see, and that doesn't have this ambiguity about fictive kinship being in the way like it does with the brother of Lord business. But unfortunately, that's not the evidence we have. And who knows? They're just now revealing stuff from Herculaneum that they've been able to use X-rays and machine learning to read burned scrolls from Mount Vesuvius destruction. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Maybe there's another lost letter of Paul just happening to be there. I doubt it, but boy, oh boy, what luck we might have.
All right. Well, I hate to cut our conversation off, but we do have a theist caller that is called in. And so we're going to be taking, but I know some people were asking in the chat down there, what I was drinking. And I just want to show everybody, I showed everybody on that's behind the scenes, but it's Kona Big Wave. It's a Hawaiian beer is what it is. Sorry, my brain is totally getting sidetracked here. Okay, so let's get to Michael, who's a theist. Hey there, Michael. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right. How you doing?
I'm good. So basically, I want to talk about theism since I'm a theist. Are y'all open to that discussion?
Definitely.
Okay, so basically, I think the fine-tuning argument provides support and evidence for theism. So I guess before I present my argument, I should define some terms. So first, I think, and I want to make sure we agree on terms. So I think evidence is something that you would expect given a hypothesis was true. So take our fossil record, right? That's evidence for evolution because it's expected on evolution being true. The fossil record is how we see it, right? Certain phenotypic traits are found, from top to bottom in the fossil record, and they're distributed how we'd expect if evolution occurred, right? So do you agree with that notion of evidence?
As long as we can agree that that's one piece of evidence.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I was just giving a definition of evidence and then an instance of that definition.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to put one minor caveat is that it will be evidence for a given hypothesis if it is expected on that hypothesis and not expected on another hypothesis. If two hypotheses have the same prediction, it can't be evidence of one versus the other.
Yeah, okay, wait. So that gets me to my second notion, which is support and evidence. So maybe that's what you mean by support and evidence. So I take support and evidence to be a piece of evidence which is more expected on one hypothesis than another.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so yeah, now we've understand terms. I think that fine-tuning supports theism because I think life is more expected on theism than naturalism because life is morally valuable. Minds are morally valuable, right? And we clearly have minds. What are your thoughts on that argument?
Michael, I'm going to have to stop you right there because morals are like minds are required in order for morals to exist. So therefore, if you're saying that life existing is morally better, then you're sort of putting the cart before the horse, or maybe it's more of like a circular logic kind of evidence here because
do you think that morality,
life has to exist.
Sorry to interrupt. Why do you think morality depends on mind?
Because it requires a mind to come to moral conclusions.
Right, but I can come to conclusions about physics, for example. That doesn't mean physics requires mind.
Here's what I would say. When it comes to morality or it comes to moral decision-making, to do that, you basically have to have preferences. You have to say, this is better than that to some end. This fulfills some sort of goal. But the thing is, the things that have goals are things with minds. So talking about a moral order to the universe, you're basically already implying some sort of magnificent mind. I think it's implied in your premises, so it's a hidden premise.
Right, so I agree that moral decision-making requires agents because you have to have something making the decisions. But you talk about hypothetical reasons, so those are reasons we have given some end, but you're ignoring what many philosophers call categorical reasons, which are reasons we have independent of our ends. Why do you think those don't exist, since that's essentially your claim?
Well, actually, if one of the interesting things, so you're talking about like categorical imperative from like Immanuel Kant and things like that, correct?
No, a categorical imperative is a particular instance of a categorical reason Kant thought. Basically, I'll line out what I mean by these terms. So take a hypothetical reason. So commonly this is understood to be a reason in the following sense. If I have a desire for X and Y achieves X, then I have a reason to do Y, right? Okay, now a categorical reason is something I have a reason to do independent of me wanting to do X. So moral realists, for example, they think that we have categorical reasons not to torture people for fun or kill, young children, stuff like that, even if we wanted to. And that seems right to me. What's your issue with that?
Well, actually, we can continue to interrogate that a little bit. So, for example, why is it wrong to torture?
Why is it wrong to torture? There are multiple explanations. So if I was a utilitarian, I might say because it causes pain. If I was a deontologist, I might say because rights are violated.
Why is it bad to violate rights? Let's take the deontology route. Why is it bad to violate rights?
Right, so that's just going to be on the theory of fundamental truth, just like in mathematical theory, certain truths about the successor function and different hyper-operations are fundamental truths, just like 1 + 1 = 2 is a fundamental truth.
Well, the thing is, 1 + 1 doesn't necessarily equal 2. That depends on which numeric system you have. If we're on binary, 1 + 1 is 0.
1 + 1 = 0 on a binary system, that may be true, right? But I don't think we're talking about the same thing then.
Right?
Well,
I'm
the thing
talking
is, like
about
I'm
in
saying,
basic
you're saying this is
arithmetic.
some sort of like absolute metaphysical sort of thing, and I'm just saying, no, it's a
Well,
choice
you got to
of
get clear on what you
the
mean by
axioms and
absolute.
definitions
So
we
I'm
have.
not making a claim about every mathematical language. Like, take, for example, the laws of logic,
Well, the thing is,
right?
though, you
The law
are
of
claiming something is
non-contradiction.
objectively the case, that something needs to be true, and I'm pointing out that a
Listen, when I
whole
say
lot of things that we think are
objectively,
absolutes, we can find are rather
here,
No,
subjective or
when I
very
say
dependent on our
objectively, I
standard.
do not mean
sorry. He was talking while you were talking, Aaron, and I couldn't hear what you were saying. But I can unmute him if
I
you
think
want
it's
me
part.
to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think it's on part because of the delay. Mike, can you hear us again?
Hold on, I'm getting him unmuted right now.
so. By
All right.
object, wait, can y'all hear? Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
We hear you now.
Now we can.
Okay. By objective, I don't mean universal, such that it's true in like every language or something like that. Like, take for example the statement "chairs exist," right? That's certainly true given what we mean by chairs in the English language. But if by the word chairs, I don't know, other language means like unicorns, then obviously that's false. So I'm not making a claim about how words are used and or symbols are used in every language, right? I'm talking about the propositions they express. So not say 1 + 1 = 2, right? I'm talking about certain mathematical objects, namely numbers, as they're understood in basic arithmetic governed by the Pineo axiom, right? So like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
0,
So,
like I could take a
so within a
basic,
particular
like,
mathematical system, 1 + 1 = 2. Sure. And of course, if someone comes along and they
well, I'm
say,
talking
prove to
about
me
basic
the Pineo
arithmetic as governed
axioms,
by the
you're
Pineo
just going to,
axiom specifically.
right. But like I say, if someone comes
Michael, if
along
you
and doubts
can't,
those, go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
listen,
Hello?
it can't. This can't work if you're going to talk over each other. So, Michael, if
Oh, that's
Aaron
my
is
apologies.
talking, yeah, if Michael, if Aaron's talking, please let him finish, and then you can interject. Okay.
Of course, sir. Of course. My bad. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. So we can say that, like, yeah, under the Pinot axioms, using base 10, 1 + 1 = 2. Sure. If someone comes along and says, are the Pinot axioms fundamental? They sure seem intuitive to us, but to say that they're fundamental, that they couldn't possibly be wrong, that I think is a harder thing to say. And what you're going with in saying that, like, rights are fundamental and should never be violated, we can always keep asking that question, why? And if we just say it's an axiom, then we've left objectivity. We're now just declaring things. And while I definitely want to preserve rights, I would give a more, what would look like a utilitarian argument to that. And ultimately, the reason I have any sort of moral compunctions, the way I feel like that any sort of moral argument is going to be compelling, is that it gets down to my most fundamental goals of what actually motivates me. If I want to make some sort of imperative statement, ultimately I have to care about why that conclusion matters. For the example, I am hungry. The sandwich will fulfill my hunger. Therefore, I ought to eat. The whole reason that the ought even possibly works is because of something that fundamentally matters to me. If I'm not hungry, then there's no reason I ought to eat, for example. And that, I think, is a more fundamental way of how we get to oughts. But nonetheless, I think this is all kind of a distraction from your main point. I think you could go with your argument about fine-tuning without having to bring in a moral dimension. All you have to say, I think, is that you would think, or you're going to argue, that fine-tuning is unexpected on naturalism, but more expected on theism. Is that correct?
I am saying that, but I'm saying that for a particular reason, and it's God's goodness. I don't see how the moral dimension is separable from what I'm talking about.
Which God?
I don't, adhere to any particular religion.
Then how do you know he's good? Like, how do you define good? Like, I don't know. It just kind of feels like you're just saying, "Oh, God's goodness," and it's just this vague, abstract sort of idea about God's goodness. I mean, that you saying, "Oh, it's God's goodness" or whatever, it literally means jack shit to me. Like, I don't know what you're talking about when you say God's goodness.
Right. Okay. So I'll answer two questions there. The first being, how do I know he's good? So I'm not making any claim to know that there is some being that has certain properties. All I'm making a claim is that if we have a hypothesis that posits such an entity with such a property, the things we see, namely laugh, are more expected. And then to answer your other question about God, well, can I finish, please?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the second question was what I mean by God's goodness. And what I mean by that is that he's just going to do the right thing in all the cases, right? As he's obligated to do.
Right. You understand that by saying that God has goodness or is good, you're directly making a claim about God, like a positive claim about God that you then have to support with evidence. Like, I feel like you're trying to skirt around this need for evidence.
No, what I'm doing here is I'm describing the properties of an entity posited by a particular hypothesis, and then looking at all the evidence around me, all the data, all the sense data, and saying that that sense data is more expected on this hypothesis than another. Like, take a God that's evil, right?
Okay.
Well, given that I think life is good, we would not expect to see life on such an evil God, but we would, given God is good, how I've defined it, and given that life is good.
If I may, life is something we might expect on an evil God, so that way there's something to torture.
Okay.
So life is expected on both good God theism and evil God theism. On evil God theism, you got to have life, so you got something you can torture.
I don't think that's necessarily true. So, for example, we might say something like this: biological life isn't needed. If we wanted something to truly be tortured, we might have like just brains, right, that aren't in bodies able to move. And we might just have them constantly feeling pain. But that's not at all what we see.
Can I just point out that this entire line of argumentation that you're putting forth there, Michael, is purely subjective in nature. Like, you haven't said anything at all that's not like subjective to your own opinion about this God that you have yet to ground in reality. You haven't given us any kind of evidence whatsoever to actually ground this God in reality, and you've barely even defined this God or what is good in order to demonstrate that this good God seems to exist. So, I mean, I feel like you're just throwing out either buzzwords or popular words or something like that. Like, you're just throwing out terms in hopes that people will either make up their own definitions or their own understandings of what you're trying to say here. It just sounds very obfuscated to me, to the point where, you know, you're not really providing any kind of evidence. You're just making a whole bunch of subjective claims and then expecting people to be like, oh yeah, I totally expect this with the good God as you've quote unquote defined it. But I still don't see any concrete evidence that actually grounds this God in our reality. I just hear you saying, oh, well, obviously this good God would have our kind of life pop up, so obviously that is better explained by God existing. That's not actually giving us evidence.
Right. Do you agree with the way I define evidence at the beginning? Because given that definition, it does count as evidence, unless you want to backtrack and get off that definition and accept another.
Well, you know, I feel like the definition that you gave, to give sort of an analogy, and Aaron can correct me if I'm wrong here, it would basically be like saying, well, aliens must have visited the Earth in the past because we find strange skeletons in the geologic column. Therefore, aliens must exist. These body plans don't match anything that we have now. Therefore, aliens must have visited the Earth a long time ago. Would you agree with that the fossil record as being evidence of aliens?
Trivially, if it's expected that we see it like that, then it is evidence, but it's not supporting evidence. And the reason for that is because the posterior probability of the fossil record on evolution is higher than the posterior probability of the fossil record on the alien hypothesis. And furthermore, the alien hypothesis has certain theoretical vices which the evolution hypothesis doesn't have. We can answer why such hypothesis isn't supported by what we observe.
So, just to be fair, what Michael is saying, if I may butt in, what Michael is saying, based on his definitions of what he means by supporting evidence, I think what he is saying is correct, because he's being clear about what is supporting evidence and saying if this evidence is more expected on one hypothesis over the other, that's then after we do our Bayesian churning of the calculator, that it adds evidence to that hypothesis. So I think he is correct to do that, but I'm going to be pushing back in a different way. Michael, I don't think it's ultimately relevant whether life is moral or not, because your ultimate statement is life is more expected on theism than naturalism, that you don't think the natural realm would produce life on its own, while on theism, you would expect that. So moral or not, I think ultimately your whole point is you were trying to argue from fine-tuning that life is only expected on theism and rather unexpected on naturalism. Is that correct?
I'm arguing that life is more expected on theism than a bare naturalistic hypothesis. But I'm trying to give an explanation why, because that may just seem like a brute assertion, and I wouldn't want to be accused of doing such a thing. And so my explanation is that, making life as it is morally good.
Doesn't actually, Michael, I'm thinking your explanation doesn't help, because if nature can produce life, whether or not it is more moral, if nature produces life, then it's the same thing anyways. Whether there is a moral dimension to life existing, that doesn't actually make naturalism more or less probable. If nature comes along and it just naturally produces life all the time, then it doesn't then have any, then morality has no importance to your argument at all. I think it's really a completely unnecessary hypothesis step.
Right. So this is the issue I take with. So you're making a non sequitur there, saying that if naturalism can make life, then we don't have any worry. But you need to understand what modality can is indexed to. I'm not saying there's a logical inconsistency. Like, there's no contradiction with any of the laws of logic to say that you can have naturalism plus life. All I'm saying is it's more expected, and I can explain why. If you take any naturalistic process, you're not going to take that to be infallible, right?
Okay, if you can explain why without having any kind of ad hoc or subjective premises.
What do you mean by ad hoc and subjective there, just so we can get clear? And what premises do you think I'm doing that are subjective and ad hoc?
Well, I mean, you're just tacking on that God is good, I feel is like an ad hoc thing, because you're not actually establishing that God is good. You're just outright saying that God is good without actually establishing that this God is good in some kind of way. You're just saying, oh, well, if this God is good, then he would allow this thing. And you're not actually providing a reason as to why that would be a good thing. I think that's kind of what Aron was trying to point out earlier with that line of questioning with, well, why is this good? Why is this bad? And I just don't feel like you're actually grounding that in like reality.
Right. Okay. So two things going on there. So as I corrected you on earlier, when I'm talking about God, right, I'm talking about a theoretical entity posited by my hypothesis to explain some evidence. So I don't need to justify why the theory is as it is. I'm constructing it so as to explain some evidence. And then you can construct an opposing theory, and we can see which one better explains the evidence. This is what happens in science all the time. As for morality, I definitely think it's objective. I can give you some formal arguments. You might not like them, but I could give a Morian argument for it or something like that. And I just think it's very clearly intuitive that morality is objective. Like, if you think it's subjective, you're committed to saying that whether or not torturing children for fun, whether or not that's good or bad, that turns on the opinions of a society, a person, etc. That seems obviously wrong to me.
It does. I mean, it does depend on the society.
What's your argument for that?
Well, my argument is demonstrative in that, you can point to several different societies in the past where what we would consider today to be torturing children to be perfectly fine. There's several different Christian groups out there right now that see that it's perfectly fine, or that the
hold on,
I'm still talking. I'm still talking. I am still talking.
Oh, my apologies, sir. My apologies.
Your apologies? I was literally talking, and then you just started talking. There's no apologies about it. Sir. You meant.
Go ahead.
Okay. There are Christian groups now that think that the what we would consider to be an abuse of children is perfectly fine. All right. All you got to do is you got to look at Mormonism. They abuse children all the time. They think it's perfectly fine. So, I mean, you can literally demonstrate that there are things that people consider to be perfectly fine, but everybody else considers to be abusive, and that shows how this morality, this moral knowledge that you claim that we all have, is totally subjective upon the group that you're in, the society that you're in, the time and place that you're in. Like, all of that is makes morality a subjective conclusion. If it was not, if like your God somehow provides this moral foundation that should apply to everybody, then why haven't we been able to suss out this moral knowledge just yet? Like, it just seems rather weird to me that there's this amorphous absolute morality that exists out there that everybody should follow, yet it seems to me like nobody seems to know what in the fuck it is. Everybody has a different opinion about what this God thinks is good, bad, right, or wrong. Everybody has different ideas about what in the fuck, what in the fuck how in the fuck to treat people. Like, it seems very subjective in nature if you actually take a look at the different societies that have existed, and even societies and groups of people that exist now. So please tell me how there's any kind of objective morality other than you subjectively coming up with some kind of system that then provides you with an objective analysis of moral decisions. That's what I think exists. But you're trying to tell me that this objective or absolute morality exists out there and that it exists outside of our minds. Be able to actually prove that without being subjective in nature.
Right. Sir, do you remember the question I asked you?
Can you repeat it?
Could you provide an argument for the conclusion that morality is subjective? What you just did was equivocate and make non sequiturs.
I fucking did. No.
Let me finish.
Stop.
Let me finish.
I did.
Let me finish.
No. You see, I have the mute button, and that's what makes me all powerful. I'm basically God in this fucking situation, okay? I did give you evidence, okay? I said the evidence is demonstrative in that you can look at several different groups that exist not only now, but in the past that have different ideas of what it means to be morally good. And in the case of like torturing children, there are groups now that are perfectly fine with torturing children as the rest of society would define torturing children. They are happy to torture children. They think it's perfectly fine to torture children. So I already gave you the evidence, and then I guess I went on a long rant about subjectivity of morality and all this other stuff and how you need to provide some kind of actual evidence for objective moral values or whatever in the fuck you're trying to argue.
If I may jump in, I would
Am I
say,
unmuted?
how about
Or,
we just...
go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was going to say, how about we just grant for the sake of discussion? Because, deciding the metaphysics of morals over a 15-minute podcast is probably going to be difficult to do. It's not like there's a gargantuan amount of philosophical literature lasting 3,000 years on this question. So let's just, for the sake of argument, accept the premise about life having inherent moral value. Let's just take it as a given. Because one of the things Michael was talking about is wanting to look at the evidence, the supporting evidence. So to repeat that basically life is supposed to have some sort of intrinsic moral value. It's better to have life than not to have life. Is that correct, Michael?
Yeah, I'm saying that on a theistic hypothesis where God is good and life is morally valuable, we would expect to see life. And that on a bare naturalistic hypothesis, where the hypothesis is that the natural world exists, we don't have any such expectation. Hence, seeing life is supporting evidence for such a hypothesis over the other. But before you go ahead, I do want to say that I'm perfectly comfortable continuing debate about the objective morality, since I think, I don't remember your co-host's name, but he made a grave, logical error when he was talking about people having certain opinions. That's completely compatible with objective morality. Moral realism doesn't make any prescriptions about whether or not people are going to have certain psychological characters and say certain things, right? Like, it's very clear that morality could be objective and people could be wrong about it. Like, for example, the earth is round, right? There are people that think it's flat. So pure disagreement doesn't, show anything about its objective nature. That's just a grave non sequitur your friend made there.
I don't think I made a non sequitur, but I'll let Aaron finish his line of questioning.
It's ultimately a question of what are we thinking about the metaphysics of morality there. And like I say, I'd rather just sidestep that for the moment, accept the premise just to continue on. So the universe should have life on it on theism. Now, may I ask the following question? How much life?
I mean, at least one entity is expected. I mean, I would probably say lots of life, or a good amount, at least enough so that people can have happiness and interact with one another, right?
So you say enough, but here's the thing. The vast majority of the universe is bereft of life, where life is actually impossible. The vast majority of the mass of the universe is in black holes. The vast majority of the universe is in the mass of black holes, in dark matter, in stars, things that biological life cannot exist in. So the vast majority of the universe automatically cannot be life-bearing. We can even look just in our own solar system, and the vast majority of the things that you could try to stand on will not be supportive of life. Heck, you can't even burrow down into the Earth very far, and it becomes inhospitable to life. The moon is inhospitable. Mars is inhospitable. Venus is very inhospitable. If we are saying life is expected on theism, why is it apparently the case that almost all the universe is devoted to non-living things if life is actually important?
Right. So I'll have 2 points. I mean, first, I think what you're saying here just kind of shows why life is not expected on naturalism. Like, you know, if the various 31 constants were different, then we wouldn't have life. And I mean, already we don't have a bunch of life in the universe, which shows, you know, imagine naturalism is true, that naturalism... Well, one moment, please let me finish this. It just shows that life is not, you know, very likely on naturalism. But the second point I want to make
Pause. You just said that the universe is fine-tuned for life, but it's also fine-tuned in such a way that life has almost a shit time ever existing. It can't be both fine-tuned for life and really shitty at making life. Those are not compatible.
That's not what I said, sir. What I said was, if naturalism is true... No, sir, that's not what I said. I conditionalized my statement.
The laws of physics,
naturalism was true.
On fine-tuning, the nature is made in such a way that it becomes compatible for life. So why is it the case that the universe has been tuned to generate life, but the vast majority of the time it fails?
Right. So the explanation I gave earlier was the moral explanation, and that's the last. No.
You're not answering my question. Why is it that the universe is created for life, but the vast majority?
But you're not allowing me.
Mute him for a moment. Because here's the thing, Mike, you're not answering my question. I am asking, why is it that if life is moral and good and we should expect it, why is it that the vast majority of the material of the universe fails to generate life? The universe creator could have created a universe in any way it wanted and have every single rock in the universe and the stars and everything else in such a way that they could be populated with life. And yet, it's not that case. That's how a universe could have been made, and if life is morally valuable, more life would be more valuable than less life. So why is it that 99.9999999% of the space, the matter of the universe is not even compatible with life, at least biological life?
Right. So, I mean, there are various explanations we could give. Yeah, okay. So one explanation we could give is that the constants couldn't be in such a way and support the life, right? Like, it couldn't be that we have the stars and all the matter you're talking about arranged in the way you want to say, and life would occur.
Why have stars?
Right? That might be one explanation, right?
Why have stars? But that's not even the main point. In fact, there is this thing that theists keep telling me about, of this place I want to go to, that apparently I can go and live forever and have wings and things like that, and it's called heaven. Why aren't we just in heaven? Apparently, that is a conceptually realizable entity. So honestly, why isn't the universe already like heaven, rather than it looks like, hey, the vast majority of the universe is not even dead?
Right, sir. I think you're going beyond the scope of what I'm saying. You're posing a different problem, which we can get to in a moment. But the main point I want to make here is
evidence, we might say.
Here, please let me finish, sir. I'm not interrupting you. Don't interrupt me. Yeah. So the main point I'm making here is just
let him go.
Just let me finish. If I was interrupting, I was doing it minimally, and whenever I did, I apologize thereafter. But the whole point is the fine-tuning hypothesis, as I've constructed it, minimally predicts that there's some life, and that is compatible with 99.99999 or whatever you said of the universe not being hospitable. I can't say with my accent, sir. But the whole point there is that you're going to have to give a reason why we would expect it at all on naturalism, which you haven't done.
Well, here's the thing. The universe is also what we would call really fucking big. So even if life is rare, given enough opportunities, it will appear. So the fact of the matter that the vast majority of the universe is not life-bearing, and only very rarely in a few cases for a short period of time in the history of the universe can it actually be sustained, is what you would expect on it being basically a fluke of physics and chemistry.
Why is that so, sir?
Again, as I noted, the vast majority of the mass and space of the universe is impossible for life.
Okay. How does that support what you
So-
said? Because what you said was,
I'm saying
if everything was a
why
cosmic
is it-
fluke, right? Here. You said if everything was a cosmic fluke, i.e., if a random, naturalistic hypothesis is true, we would expect to see some life like grow over time given how big the universe is. But I'm just asking for an argument for that because, I can give you some quotes from physicists, but Roger Penrose, for example, estimates that the odds of the initial low entropy state of our universe occurring by chance alone are on the order of 1 in 10 to the 10 times 123 power. Right? That's
All right, can I
Now,
pause
here's
you
the
right
thing.
there?
Probably
Can I pause you
a
right
number
there?
like that,
what?
I'm gonna hop down this one real fast because here's the thing. What
Okay.
Penrose is pointing out is not an argument for fine-tuning for life. He is saying it is really weird that the early entropy of the universe was fine-tuned to such a low value. The amount of entropy we needed in the past to be for life to be existent is not so fine-tuned. It doesn't need to be fine-tuned to such a level. All that has to happen is entropy was lower in the past than it is now. So you're confusing fine-tuned as in it's some really weird particular value that it's fine-tuned to a particular end. And that is not true. The value of entropy in the early universe could have taken just about any value in the past, so long as it's less than it is now, it's compatible with life, the universe, and everything as we've come to know it. So what Penrose is saying, hey, why is this really weird, strange thing? What is forcing it to that value? And not that there is something forcing it that value for the sake of life. That is an add-on that only happens when you're not carefully reading and you're probably then mining it from other sources trying to then say, hey, we got fine-tuning, therefore God.
Right. I think you're confused about what I'm saying. I'm not saying Penrose is giving a
No,
fine-tuning
here's the
argument.
thing. I'm not
I'm giving
confused
an
about the
instant-
physics, so please be careful about that, all right?
I'm not saying you're confused about the physics. I'm saying you're confused about
You
what I
just
said,
did.
sir. I
You
was not
just
taking
did, Mike.
Penrose as giving a fine-tuning argument. What I was doing
You
was I
literally
saying
just
that's
did, Mike. You
extremely...
literally just did. You cited
No,
Penrose
that's not
as
what
an
I did.
example of
I'm going to
fine-tuning
explain
for
what
life.
I did, sir. Listen, what I was saying was that's an extremely low value, and that's something that we would expect to have given that such entropic conditions are life conducive on an all-good God. But you're saying even on a random fluke, like a random naturalistic hypothesis...
Pause. You have literally just made the same statement again, and I have pointed out it doesn't even matter what the early value of entropy was. All that had to be was less than it is now for life to exist. All that has to happen is entropy to increase over time. It did not have to start at a particular value. That is what Penrose is getting at. It's this really weird small value. It doesn't need to be weirdly small for life to exist. So again, you're taking that premise about this weird bit of low entropy value and giving it a purpose, which Penrose never argued and is in fact not true. It is not the case that life needed that to be the value in the early universe for life to exist.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I was not citing Penrose as giving an argument for fine-tuning. I was citing Penrose as to say that there are these, low probabilistic conditions, such as low entropy state at the beginning of the universe, and that we would expect such a thing on theism. Now, you may say we didn't need that specific one for life. Okay, that might be true, sir, but you're going to have to give an explanation as to why we have entropic conditions that are life conducive at all on naturalism. All right.
So the only thing that the number that you shot out earlier, as if to prove that it's it's not likely that naturalism would have produced life. All that means is that life is unlikely to occur, which is exactly what we see in the universe, and is therefore.
Actually, I need to stop you there, John, because it doesn't even say that. Oh. In fact, all this is just say, hey, this value is really weirdly small. There is, in fact, no argument you've even given, Mike, why that is expected on theism. Why on theism do you expect this particular value for early state entropy? Can you show the mathematics?
Is that particular value life conducive?
but it's not specific to life. It could have been just about any other
But is it
value.
life
So to
conducive,
say it was fine-tuned for life requires evidence for that. And I'm pointing out it is not the case that it needed to be that low. In fact, it is overtuned as a way that Sean Carroll would put it. And in fact, as an argument against fine-tuning for life, because here's a value that is just way out of whack for what is actually necessary. It is overdone, and that is not what you expect on everything finely tuned, that if it was ever so slightly different, then the universe couldn't exist or life couldn't exist. It's like, no, it could have taken a whole bunch of different values, but for some reason, something is just like turning the knob and like cranking up to 11 as hard as it can for no particular reason, in the purpose of no particular reason for life. So I'm saying it's not
that particular
evidence
value
of
life
fine-tuning.
conducive?
That and a bazillion others. In fact, there's another
A
problem we
bazillion
have
others?
when we keep talking about things being improbable. Here's the thing. What is the probability that the gravitational constant is approximately 6.6 times 10 to the negative 32, if I'm remembering that off the top of my head? What's the probability that that is what big G should be in our gravity equations?
I do not know, sir. What is probability?
The thing is, nobody knows because there's no probability distribution that exists to explain that. We actually cannot say what is probable or improbable for these constants because they could take any value, and we don't have any reason they should follow any particular probability distribution, which means we actually cannot say that such and such constant value is improbable. It is actually mathematically impossible to say so.
Wait, so you're saying they could take any value and life still occur?
I'm saying that you cannot say any value is more probable than another in some sort of way that is actually mathematically consistent.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean, sir, because if we use probability as understood by Bayesian confirmation theory, we can do just that.
I know what probability is, and here's the thing. You need to talk about what is the prior probability, and the problem is we actually can't define that because the thing is the values can be anywhere from negative infinity to positive infinity. There's no restrictions there, and there's no reason to think some values are more probable than any other. So if you actually try working out what is like the probability density at any given point for all the possible values, you can't actually define that. You basically find that the probability is 0 for all possible constants.
Right. So you're saying there's an infinite set of ways it could be such that life is more conditionally probable?
No, you're not listening to me very carefully here. What I'm saying is because
I am
the values
I'm just asking
don't
if
have
that's what
a
you're saying.
probability
You can just say yes or
distribution
no
we can
to
point
that question, sir.
Here's the thing. We can't actually say that some values of the constants of nature are more likely than any other. And if you try to set that as some sort of uniform distribution, that it could take any value of equal probability between negative infinity and positive infinity, if you try working out the math of what is the probability that the constant would be in any given range, it's always 0. It actually works out that you can never say how probable it is. Quite literally, this is actually something that you get in like your first couple lessons of quantum mechanics when you try describing an electron without any sort of barrier. You find out, hey, the equation actually isn't solvable. It's not mathematically consistent. I'm saying the same thing here with the constants of nature. You can't actually say the constants themselves are improbable because we can't say what the underlying probability of any particular value is.
Wait, what's the argument that we can't know the prior probability? If I'm, for example, a subjective Bayesian, the prior probability is just going to be whatever my credence in the relevant proposition is. The prior probability is stipulated by the hypothesis.
That you keep talking about the objectivity of morality, but you will jump to subjective Bayesianism to prove the existence of life?
Just wait.
No, wait. So I'm sorry, Michael. Yeah, I had to mute you there, Michael. We do need to. We've got full lines, so we do need to wrap this up. If you want to say any kind of last words or anything like that, that this would be the time. But otherwise, we do have to move on.
Oh, can I say my last words now?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, my only point is, I think I don't know. Could you say your names again? So I know who's who before I say Aaron and
John and John.
John? Oh, right.
Yes.
So, in my conversation with Aaron, I think you're getting confused about what I'm saying about the various probabilities. So, I mean, I'll just say this. The prior probability isn't being calculated by the hypothesis or by the Bayesian type of confirmation I'm going for here, right? What's being calculated is the conditional or posterior probability. And you're kind of saying that we can't know what the prior probability is, but for example, I'm a subjective Bayesian, so I think the prior probability is just whatever my credence in the relative proposition is before examining the evidence, right? And so I'd say personally, probability of theism before examining the evidence is something like 1%, but even 1%, that's higher than what we would get if we did a conditional probability with naturalism, the calculation for that. As for my conversation with John, I just want to say, you did make a huge non sequitur when you were talking about objective morality, saying we see people say things to...
I'm sorry. No, I dropped you. I did not make a non sequitur about any fucking thing, and I let you have your final say, and that's it. And so now I'm going to have my final say. So I feel like, and maybe I was just misunderstanding where he was going with it, was that he would, regardless of what the actual number was meant to establish, I felt like what he was trying to say was that, the likelihood of life arising naturally is so low that it makes more sense for some kind of good God to create life, or to have or to be the reason why life even developed. But the problem is that you would have to literally show that the probability of life on naturalism as being zero in order to make a magical explanation more likely, because he's forgetting about the prior probabilities of natural processes just, are the explanations for everything that we have experienced in reality. And that makes any natural explanation for life to be far more likely than a magical explanation. And I have to say, I'm so glad that I had you here there, Aron, to sort of, come in between both me and Michael, because sometimes my brain just gets fixed on one idea and I go with it.
Yeah. I think I can understand what point he was trying to get at, in that I think we would agree that it's actually immoral to torture children, even if some societies or some subgroups of people did think so. I think that's what he's trying to get at, and that there's ultimately some objective reason that can be given. But again, because that is itself a gargantuan, a level of argumentation itself felt wasteful. And I think, just to make sure I am clear on everyone here, when he keeps talking about being a Bayesian and a subjective Bayesian, I need to ask him on how he figured out his prior probability that for example, the gravitational constant is 6.7 times 10 to the minus 11. It finally hit me. 6.7 times 10 to the minus 11 Newton meters squared per kilogram squared. Why is it that particular value? How probable is that particular value versus half that or twice that? And the thing is, you can't just say subjective Bayesian. You have to actually justify what you're going to say that background probability is. And if you say, they're all equally probable, which was my whole point, if it's just like, hey, we don't know why one value is any more probable than any other, so it's just a uniform probability, it actually works out that you can then not actually assign a probability density overall. You get nonsense results. And here's the thing. What I'm saying here is not some really super esoteric statistical thing that's hidden away. I am actually repeating something given by Timothy and Lydia McGrew, Christian apologists, who have also pointed out you can't use fine-tuning because of this mathematical problem. And guess what? They're absolutely right. When the apologists are on my side, you better watch out.
All right. Well, we are going to go on to Alexander, and we've only got maybe 10 or 15 minutes to really talk here because we do have full lines, like I said. So, hey there, Alexander. How you doing?
Hello, how you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. So my case is if Christianity is the most strong, compelling case right now, why would it be so dismissive, or why would it be any type of dismissiveness to say that it is a basically not to be true? Basically, like, there's a lot of collaboration, right, between all these different authors, specifically at the point of time where it all started. Why would they have any motive to start up something where historically it's been proven that nobody would want to do that?
If I may quickly, Alex, I think you might have used a word that is a bit of a Freudian slip, because you said that they collaborated. I think you might have meant corroborated, but the fact that you said collaborated is actually more true, because the various gospel authors used each other's works and changed things. So Mark is the first gospel, Matthew, Luke, and most likely John all used Mark and probably even had some knowledge of each other when they were writing and changing things. So literally, it was collaboration, not corroboration.
Would that make a historical claim falsifiable, though?
Well, I think at the very least, if the sources are not actually independent, then you have less evidence to use for corroboration and you can't make it probable then. If ultimately there's one source and then everyone is riffing off that first source, all you're left with is what's the quality of the first source.
But there are independent sources, though.
Such as?
What are they?
I mean, it's a contemporary, undisputed fact. That's why it's such a strong case for Christianity. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been like,
that's just a statement. That's just a statement, and yet another claim. Can you provide the independent sources that you're talking about?
Well, it's like, I'm not, Luke and what is it, Mark? Yeah, they do corroborate or collaborate.
Luke is using Mark as a source and changing Mark where seeing fit.
Right.
I'd like to jump into that could be a professional, like, in-depth discuss. Well, I actually want to ask you, like, what do you think of all the prophecies, like how people say the
prophecies are bullshit. Let's talk about the historical things. Let's talk about real historical things. Prophecies are bullshit. If that's your major argument, then there's no reason for us to have a discussion, because prophecies are bullshit. So let's talk about the historical things. Do you accept that Luke has direct copies of things that are in Mark? It is not a fallacy, and if you just blatantly, if you just say that I'm using a fallacy when I'm just speaking fucking facts, then I'm going to mute you, and that'll be that. Can you please provide, or can you acknowledge at least that Luke copies material from Mark and most likely Matthew too?
No, I don't have it in front of me.
There's literally verbatim passages in Luke that also exist in both Matthew and Mark, showing that Luke copied from one of the two. And there are verses that are in Matthew that appear in Matthew, but also verbatim appear in Luke. So how can you say that those verbatim things that appear in all of those gospels, how can you say that they independently came up with all of them?
Because it is of the context of the source that it was necessary for them to be having to copy between them. There's individuality statements that are cleared for historical verifying, but that doesn't make it a claim.
And you explained then how when Matthew added the zombie apocalypse in chapter 27, that made it more veracious, that when Jesus died, literally saints popped out of their graves and started walking around and going into Jerusalem, were seen by many, and apparently nobody else in the historical record noticed this. How did that add veracity to the story?
That adds by the setting in which it was written. I mean, nobody could have else wrote in that because of the immaterial that they didn't have able to write it down.
You're not understanding me. Alex, I don't think you're understanding me. You were saying that these individuals are adding things to improve the veracity of it. I'm giving you an example of something that I think if you read it in any other source, you would say, holy cow, is this some bad science fiction? And that is literally what we got in chapter 27, where Jesus dies, giant earthquake, temple veil rips in half, the sky is darkened for hours, and then literally the graves of the dead saints break open, the saints come out, and they're basically shuffling around like zombies of some sort, going into Jerusalem, allegedly seen by many. That is what is said in the Gospel of Matthew, and yet no other source, Christian or otherwise, even mentions this early version of Michael Jackson's Thriller. To me, this looks like fiction writing, not something to add veracity.
Oh, okay, yeah. It could, the full. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Even though that was said and nobody writes on it, there's still a probability that it is the true fact claim, even though nobody else mentioned it. You know what I mean?
If I told, okay, in that case, I'm going to do a bit of a hypothetical. I'm going to give you two statements, and we'll go one after the other. Here's the first statement. I talked to my grandfather today. Does that strike you as okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, it seems totally probable, right?
Right.
Okay, now I'm going to make a small adjustment. I'm going to give you a little bit more information. I talked to my grandfather today. He died in 2003. Do you believe me now that I had a conversation with my grandfather who has been dead for 20 years?
Sure. I just, out of curiosity, I just thought to ask you: have you ever debated as a sort like somebody, so I can watch your material?
Can you no? Can you just answer the question instead of like trying to deflect or whatever you're trying to do?
Yes. But respectfully, like, I'm just really curious to see you guys' material, so I can like take notes and stuff, and then I can call back later and give a case as to my analysis between you guys' statements. Have you guys debated anybody?
I wouldn't necessarily think it's a good idea to try to take notes to try to come back at this like it's some sort of game. I think it's basically, I want to have a discussion until we get to the truth of things.
It's a completely articulate question that I'm asking. I mean, how can you even say that? That's such a bizarre statement for you to say. How are you going to say that it's a really bad idea to take notes and then come back so I can give a rebuttal?
You want to come back to take notes so you can come back and try to rebut everything as if it's like, I got to come back because I need to do whatever I can to hold to my position. My view is, let's just have the discussion and see if we learn something from it, rather than what can I do to entrench my position.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I want to do. I'm saying yes. Okay,
so let's actually go back to my question.
Yes,
do you believe my statement that I had a conversation with my 20-year-old dead grandfather?
I mean, no, but it could still be true out of your own experience. I don't believe but it could still be true.
Okay, all right. That's what I would normally expect folks to say. So, if you had a source that talked about things that are at the very least improbable, shouldn't that make your confidence in what they say decrease?
Not when it comes to a claim that the whole book is about a deity, right? A supernatural deity.
Actually, I think that might make things worse, because honestly,
like if it was an Alexandrian like a Greek poem, right? Or no, like a historical event like Abraham Lincoln or whatever, and said like Abraham Lincoln suddenly did this and zombies started to come up. But if it's the Son of Man resurrecting and that has the power, absolutely not. I will not. It would be,
prove he was the Son of Man. Prove that one. Well, I being a mythicist, I'd have to have you prove that Jesus existed in the first place. But let's go with this. The idea that Jesus existed. You know, let's move past that. Let's I doubt it, but let's move past this. For the sake of conversation, let's assume that he existed. Right? I'm perfectly fine with. I'm perfectly fine with that. Prove that he was actually the Son of Man, and prove it with like, some kind of evidence outside of the Gospels, because the Gospels are anonymous. The Gospels are anonymous works that have no source information in them, as far as we can tell. So, what's your evidence that Jesus was actually the Son of Man? And then you would have to go and prove that the Bible represents this quote unquote Son of Man in a true historical way. So let's start with proving he was the Son of Man.
Like what, in a material way, empirical way?
Just using the normal historical method of proving events or proving aspects of persons in the past.
Okay, well, I mean, I can go in a long lineage like method, right? Not just in a like New Testament source way, but I mean, you say that prophecies are BS, right? But I mean, if it's whatever, I don't want you to get, I don't know how you can come to that.
Fine. Which prophecy do you think proves that Jesus was the Son of Man?
Okay, well, if you take a date, right? If you take a date that was written about the accounts of Jesus, right? Like let's say Mark, Luke, and John, whatever. But then you in that same tradition, you go back to the lineage of messianic prophecies, right? That are dated, right? You can't be like, well, these could have been written afterwards. No, it's like it's undisputed that they were dated way before, right? And they let's say they're fine tuned, right? Like the fine tune argument, like the universe, right? On top of the fine tuned universe,
Alex,
you have
let's get a little bit specific. Let's talk about a particular prophecy.
Please,
No.
you can't just,
Let's get specific because I think we're going to waste our time. Give us a specific prophecy.
Okay, fine tune universe and fine tune book. All right, let's just say
give us a specific prophecy.
Isaiah 53. Isaiah 53. He was bruised for our iniquities. He was. I can't read it out of the top of my head, but it's like what 500 years ago, before the time Christ.
Let me just
this is what happens
right
if you don't actually
what's...
read what prophecy says. Because here's the thing: prophecy is what it's saying in Isaiah 53 is talking about Israel.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Go ahead and actually read it in the Hebrew because that's what you got to check. You can't go by how the Christians changed it to better form to what they wanted it to say. Because you go back to it, you read it in context, and you realize this is about the suffering of Israel. That's the servant that is being talked about there. It was then reinterpreted messianically, but in its original writing, it is clearly talking about Israel.
So you think that Israel would be in the context of all the things that passage says, right? Bruce,
a book about Israel talking about Israel? That's exactly what I expect.
Yeah, but that doesn't follow the context within Israel.
What do you mean?
That doesn't follow the description over a nation at a time. It was about a person. The description says about a person.
The original context of Isaiah 53 is Israel. I mean, you can look at biblical Old Testament scholars all over the place. It's definitely about Israel. It's talking about Israel. What happened was that there were sects of Jews that were busy with reinterpreting the Old Testament in order to illuminate information about the coming Messiah, and this occurred in the 1st century BCE all the way up to the 1st century AD, and even on past that, I'm sure. But this kind of crap, Aaron, I can't remember what it's called right now. It's a specific practice.
You're talking Pesher?
Pesher, yes.
I think you're talking the Pesher, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, they were creating peshers that were reinterpreting Old Testament information in order to reveal information about this so-called Messiah that was supposed to come. And we know that they did this multiple times because there were several people that were figured to be messiahs. And what they did was they reinterpreted like Isaiah 53 to be about other supposed messiahs that also died, and they couldn't figure out, well, why did he die? He's not supposed to die.
Wait, what?
Isaiah 53. What?
Wait. So you're
oh my God! The Jews had different ideas about who the Messiah was. Oh my shit!
That is an absolute, undisputed, falsifiable statement. You're saying that's completely wrong. That's mythicism and Gnosticism. Like steroids.
Falsify my ass.
I'm sorry,
baby.
but the idea that there was more than one messianic concept is so widely agreed upon. Just go to the Dead Sea Scrolls. They had a concept of two messiahs: a Davidic Messiah and another Messiah that would be more priestly, along this line of Aaron, for example. So there was literally in the Dead Sea Scrolls the idea of two different sorts of messianic figures. And this actually then also goes on, you can see it in later rabbinic and medieval sources. The fact is that the idea of who and what the Messiah was is something very flexible, changing, multivariate, and what's the old saying? There's a saying when it comes to theology, when it comes to Judaism: 2 rabbis, 3 opinions.
I mean, that's absolutely nuts for me. I mean, you would expect, right? The whole, like, okay, then let me ask you guys. Let's ask, like, why do scholars, right, biblical scholars, right, or Christians or whatever, that really look into the Bible or whatever, why won't they come up to these conclusions if they're so evidently, as you say, real? Why wouldn't
They
there
do.
be? Why is there
scholars
why,
do? They have.
No. But I'm saying like Christian scholars that follow that Fifth Three is about
Why does it
Messiah
have to
and
be
all that.
Christian scholars? So, like when we're talking about the
What
Old Testament, I mean, why wouldn't Hebrew scholars or Old Testament scholars, why wouldn't they suffice? Why I feel like you're trying to, I guess, limit the field of experts here to only the experts that you think would affirm what you're saying. So that seems to be like you're trying to manipulate the data.
in a world where like in a world where truths can be relative or whatever, like you have people trying to change math, you have people trying to change the world, if it's flat or if it's round. I guess you can never change the reality of what a statement is. I mean, they can always try to find loopholes, and
I
I
have
guess is what
no
you guys are
idea
doing.
what in the fuck you're talking about right now
Yeah.
because it has no bearing on what we're actually discussing.
I feel like you have actually found a loophole to try to like guide yourself out of the actual statement as to what Isaiah 53
Oh
means.
no! I found a loophole which includes following the scholarship to a conclusion that is most likely correct. Holy fuck!
Well,
I should really stop
scholars-
fucking doing
well,
that one.
Well, universities teach evolution, dude. Like, how is that even bizarre or not enough for you? And they make it actually true.
No! They
Dude,
teach
I'm
evolution?
sorry, Alex, but we have the fossils, we win. And I'm going to have to say that's plenty
You
to
have the
end that point
fossils,
right
yeah.
there.
That means that animals died. It doesn't mean that where's the missing links? Where's that at? You have fossils.
What's the missing link, Alex?
Listen, no, Aaron, listen, man, okay? If there are monkeys now,
Yeah,
how did we evolve from
I got
monkeys, okay?
Oh, I'm a monkey.
Yeah, we
we
were
got
in
a
the
thinker over
in
here.
the pond, and now we're fish, and now we're monkey, and now we're good stages. Just draw pictures. Just believe by pictures. Imagine.
Aaron, are
Where's the
you
evidence?
done with
No
Alexander
evidence.
here?
Alex,
Yeah,
I think I need to remind you of something important. We are monkeys. Literally, I am a monkey, you are a monkey, John is a monkey. If you look at actually how we define what animals are, we are a subset of monkeys in the same way we are a subset of mammals, in the same way that mammals are a subset of animals.
Okay, prove the whole lineage of empirically, man. You're just making a statement.
Are you denying that I am a mammal?
Yeah, because I mean, you're a human, dude.
Mammals, humans are a mammal.
That we
are we animals?
That we became, and that dinosaurs are now chickens. Like, think of the huge bizarreness.
Alex, am I an animal? Am I of the class Animalia, or the family Animalia, or kingdom Animalia?
No,
so you're saying no. So I'm not multicellular. I don't have mitochondria. I don't have organs.
Yes, but that
makes me an animal. Booyah! Done. No. Alex, it's almost like you don't know biology.
Let me give you an analogy.
I gave you facts, so I don't fucking care about your analogies.
Say I'm a coder. I give you every single type of code the same I would give every single computer. But I still have this one code that is set apart from every single one, and every single other program has the same code that I've given them that I also give to you. That does not make you the same as all the other programs. You are set apart. That is the same analogy that God gave us.
If I'm set apart, then how come it is in my DNA I have endogenous retroviruses that are identical to those found in chimpanzees in the exact same sorts of spots, which you would only get by inheritance? Or have you never heard of endogenous retroviruses?
I can also do that as a coder. Do
you know what endogenous retroviruses do in your DNA?
No, but I know what a code is.
Jack shit. That's what they do. So what code are you just putting in there randomly in the exact same spots and exactly what you would expect if you had a nested hierarchy of animals that would suggest common ancestry in the same exact way that we would do a DNA test to show that you are the child of your parents? It's literally the same sort of thing. If you go by what you are claiming, you cannot claim that you are the son of your parents.
We share the same DNA.
Well, you just said that isn't actually good enough, because a coder could have just happened to put things in the exact same sort of way that would have suggested inheritance, but it's just a big coincidence. So basically, we're in the matrix now, and the coders are just messing with our heads at this point.
How do you think life began? Do we know how life began? Like through everything, abiogenesis or whatever, like the first cell? Do we even know?
There's lots of actually interesting science that's been going on there. So, for example, that we can actually see there's selection even at the molecular level, that some sorts of molecules are more likely to prosper than others. And this actually then begins to drive a level of selection even at the prebiotic level. There is the formation of RNA on clays that we've seen, been able to experimentally see that. We see that amino acids and other building blocks are even formed in space. So actually, there's a lot of interesting science going on that's actually helping us understand more and more how life came about. It's not just a gigantic question mark. We're actually making pretty good progress.
Oh, so we still have no idea. We still don't know how it came to exist.
How is it when I say we can see all these building blocks the same as we have no idea? That is literally you denying evidence.
How is it that all the science that we have and all the materials that we have to be able to replicate these models, right, from a prebiotic, how is it we can't really reproduce the first cell, but like naturalistically in a pond, all of a sudden it came through like a genius way, step by step? Like, that's bizarre, man. What?
Well, here's the thing. First off, you're actually assuming the first life form was the same as the modern cell. What was going to have existed back then was a much simpler, barely functioning kind of cell that would have had first a lipid bilayer, which actually formed spontaneously. If you, for example, just take oil, put it in water, it starts balling up. That actually happens at a molecular level as well. So that is literally how cell walls or cell membranes are formed. Literally just oil in water, making a lipid bilayer. So that is completely natural. There's no mystery there at all. Literally, you can do that in the kitchen right now. So that's one example. The formation of RNA. We actually have a lot of good work that's been going on there in what's called the RNA world hypothesis. And this is all the stuff that I just have a glancing level of knowledge, even though I'm just in physics. Alex, it sounds like you probably don't know this sort of stuff, and I would really recommend you investigate it because it's just so awesome and fascinating. It's not that we don't know anything. It's we've already figured out some really interesting puzzle pieces, and it's pointing in a fascinating direction. And I want us to continue to explore this rather than just say we know nothing. God did it.
Have you been taking notes?
Didn't we originally start talking about Jesus at the beginning of this call?
No, I'm saying that I'm saying that it's literally impossible to form a procedurement of cells that require what is needed to build a process of all these different organs, specifically at a time when you need to have a survivability rate from the cells that need to reproduce in a fast rate. And if you don't have that, everything dies. Everything around the whole system dies. The organs, the lifestyle, even organisms, everything dies.
Reproduction and selection. Literally, even without life, reproduction and selection already begins to exist with certain molecules. And all you have to do is reproduce at a faster rate than things are being destroyed, and then you can build it up and have the building materials for other things. And again,
thank God, naturalistic problem things are so smart, man. Man, they're smarter than all the coders you see, man. Thank God for the naturalistic probabilities, right? Like, I'm so glad
it's interesting
natural processes are so
because it's actually my day job, and a big part of machine learning is letting the computers basically bounce around and figure out what the right parameters are, which is better than us trying to go in and code things out. So
nobody built the computers in the first place.
Is used in some forms of machine learning and is actually more effective than a human coming in and trying to think things through. So it's almost like this evolution thing works really darn well.
Yeah. Great coders.
Okay, Alexander.
Computers
Alexander.
Like, dude.
Alexander. We have to move on. We still have we've got a lot more callers to get to.
You
really appreciate your call and the interaction.
I actually got a lot of science, so Alex, we got to say goodbye.
Yeah, and I dropped him. I mean, I'm sorry if I would understand it if you would interrupt with something that's meaningful to what I was currently saying, but he just started continuing on with his fucking apologist bullshit that he read off of answers in goddamn Genesis.
Yeah.
But
I was having
anyways,
a little bit of fun, but I decided like, hey, wherever he wants to jump, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to jump there and jump ahead of you because I've seen this dance before. And believe me, I can tango better than you in these sorts of things if you're going to talk like that.
Yeah. Oh man, I do like how it didn't work with him, like talking about prophecies and all this other stuff, and in the Bible, and trying to historically establish the Bible, and then he's like, "Oh, but what about abiogenesis?" It's like, "Oh well, fuck."
I'm a little
All right.
disappointed we didn't get to talk about the failed prophecies from Ezekiel, about what happened to
Yeah.
Tyre, or what didn't happen to Tyre. Because if prophecy is, if it's good enough for the goose, it's good enough for the gander. So failed prophecy, woo, there we go.
All right. Are you ready to head on to our next caller?
I'm fired up. You can tell. Let's go.
Yes, let's fucking go. All right. Hi,
Let's
Justin.
fucking go.
Justin's a deist.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
My name is Justin, and my entire argument is very, very simple. Can we agree that the cosmos is time and space? Hello?
I'm thinking through that, and I don't think I can say that, because is matter the same thing as time and space? That's really not obviously so I'm hesitant to agree with that.
Yeah, I feel like you'd have to add energy in there. Like energy is a big factor in like the cosmos in general. Whether you want to go with like Einstein's equation where you can convert between matter and energy freely, or whatever.
Let's move one
I
step
feel like
at a
you would
time.
need to add energy. Okay.
I apologize that I interrupted you. Let's just move one step at a time. So we've got time and space, and you're contingently agreeing on that. And then we can also agree maybe that the universe, or the cosmos, depending on how you want to look at it, is a combination of straight line and radiant energy. We have light and we have sound frequencies. So to make everything really simple, I'm sure you're familiar with Dozenal mathematics and how the Sumerians counted time. If you hold out your hand, palm facing, and you arc your thumb across your hand to the base of your pinky, you will see two lines count upwards: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Transfer that 12 to your left thumb: 12, 24, 36, 48, 60. There are 60 seconds in a minute.
Hold
60 minutes
on.
in
You
an
lost
hour.
me at 2 lines. You lost me at 2 lines. I see. Hold on. I'm doing it right now in front of me. I see one line that's crossed. I mean, like there's a lot of lines. Like there's not just 2 lines here. What if I multiply all these lines by 3 and then divide by pi?
There are major divisions across your hand, and this is how timekeeping was invented in history.
Timekeeping?
The Sumerians came up with it? Yes. This is where time comes from. This is how humans invented the ability to understand time, and that's well documented. It's Sumerian sexagesimal mathematics.
Base 60.
Base 12.
How does this factor into a god?
You said sex, so that's 6. This is base 60. And that actually has a lot of nice full features in terms of being able to make fractions, which is the really nice thing about the base 60 system, and why there's ultimately then why 60 seconds in a minute, 360 degrees in a complete circle, etc.
Correct. Now, once we have the fact that we have time in our hand, let's move on to space. Now, I want you to make the gun symbol with your left hand.
I think we get demonetized for that, but I'll do it off camera. Okay.
Well, yeah, just so nobody can see it. We're going to turn it into something different. And we know that Pythagoras' hypotenuse is a squared plus b squared plus c squared. And further back in history, when buildings and everything was built, how they were achieved and every flat tool that has ever existed was based on this idea. And so we're going to count the same amount of lines, and across your index finger, you will find there are 5 divisions, 5 major divisions. And up your thumb, you will count 3. Now, we have to imagine
I only see
variables.
2, honestly.
Where
are the 3 divisions? I really only noticed 2.
Well, look carefully, and you will see 5 and 3. And then the missing variable is 4, right? When we multiply any multiple of 3, 4, and 5, we get a square. And mathematically, this is how squares are created, right? So you have the hypotenuse in your hand, which is space. So I look at this as we have time and space written directly into our hand, and all of human creation is dependent upon these two factors. You have time to live, and you have time to build. And the most important thing for you is to have shelter and tools so that you can provide for your family, right? I mean, throughout human history, now you can go to Home Depot or buy a house or whatever, but people needed this information. And what an amazing coincidence that we would have both time and space right there.
All right. So
Now,
among the other things,
at
I
God?
think I need to back up on a few math points, if we may. You said
Okay.
3, 4, 5 from. If you're talking about a 3, 4, 5 triangle, I know what you're referring to. Is that what you meant?
yes,
Okay. And you said from that, then we could build squares.
correct.
But a 3, 4,
It's
5
actually how it's
triangle
made.
is itself a triangle. And if you take two of those triangles together, you get a rectangle, not a square, because you would have sides of 3 and sides of 4. And that's a rectangle, not a square, which would have to have equal sides.
Well, when you use a sector and a compass, this is how squares are constructed. And this is how
No.
people measured squares, right? When you built a building, you had a string and you tied knots in it at the multiples and you
No,
laid
Justin,
out.
we got to
This
back
is how
up. Here's the
ziggurat.
thing. You just gave me something that's mathematically false, and you want to build up some amazing metaphysics because of how many joints there are on my finger. And again, I'm looking at my thumb, and what you're telling me is denied by my very eye. So I think we got a whole lot of issues right here, right now. And I think I had bubbles going over my head. The thumbs up thing does weird things in the camera. I'm not sure what's going on anymore.
Oh.
Anyways, I'm easily distracted.
My issues with this argument is that it sounds a lot like the numerology arguments that you get from people that talk about the Bible and how, you multiply one number by another number and then that equals 69. And then all of a sudden you're in a weird compromising situation with God. And I can do the exact same thing right now. I can count. Look, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 monitors. Now, 4 monitors times 3 is 12. And then I've got 2 desks that these 4 monitors are sitting on. So multiply that by 2, and you've got the 24-hour time cycle of the Earth. And then if you count the number of bricks in my house, it's probably going to equal some kind of fucking amazing number that proves that my particular deistic fucking version of God is the only one, because it provides shelter. And that's going to be divisible by 12 or some other number right there. But then if you compare those numbers to the number of creases on your hand and then multiply it by the number of vertical and horizontal creases across your neck, then you're obviously going to prove that God exists. This is how
You're
it sounds to me.
far too complicated. Make the OK symbol. Make the OK symbol, and you've got 3 fingers.
I think that might also get us
I'm
demonetized,
making-
unfortunately.
And then you have 5
I'm making
fingers.
the OK
You have
symbol.
3,
I'm
4,
making it complicated.
Yes, you're overcomplicating it. Think like a caveman would have to. You don't have the ability to write things
All right,
down.
Marjorie Taylor
You
Greene,
only
got it.
have what is observable to you, right? And you have 3, 4, and 5 in 2
I've only
different
got
ways
4
in your
monitors. Do
hand.
you have 5 monitors? I don't know.
Actually, I do.
You're rattling off numbers. I mean, okay, so okay. Aaron has 5 monitors. If you count my phone, I have 5. What do we do with 5 after that?
I don't understand why you're making it more complicated than it needs to be. You need to put yourself in the position of the caveman who needs mathematical information to create shelter. He doesn't have monitors.
Hold on. You just said he's a
He
caveman.
has-
Why is he building shelter? He lives in a cave.
Yeah, he doesn't build a cave. Like, what do you
That's just an
think
expression, and you
cavemen
know it.
are?
That's just an expression, and you know it. I'm talking about an era of history. You know, that 300,000
You're
years
talking
where
about what,
humankind.
Neanderthals or some of our other our other pre Homo sapien like ancestors.
We'll call
like
it
so
before written history. How about that?
Okay, I don't think that cavemen I actually identifies all humans or other human cousins. As, I don't think caveman's a good label for that, but I get how you think that might be pedantic. My entire point in doing a reductio ad absurdum here is the fact that I feel like what you're doing is playing around with numbers. And if that is the basis for your God, I feel like it's an argument from math. Like, oh, there's math that exists, therefore this God has to exist, or some kind of supernatural God, deistic kind of God has to exist. And I do believe that any universe that's going to exist is going to be mathematical in nature. So even the naturalistic universes that require no God to exist would be mathematical in nature, and therefore render your entire argument here moot, because we can actually discern between your deistic version of a universe and a naturalistic version of a universe using math.
I feel like math is the same everywhere in the universe at all times.
Math is the same in our universe as far as, well, so with our experiences, as far as our simplistic understanding of math, it is the same, but we've discovered certain edge case situations where mathematics and physics and all that kind of breaks down. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but like the black holes, like at the event horizon of black holes, and as you go farther back in time to the inflation of the universe, physical laws also break down. So I mean, that
more
not
accurately,
everywhere all the time.
Our current descriptions break down. I would think that whatever the ultimate laws of physics are, they are still consistent there, and we just haven't figured them out yet.
Sorry, yes, that's what I meant, was our description. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification. So, I mean, that I'm just saying that if you're relying on math and a very subjective view of your hand in the shape of a gun to prove that your God exists, I think that you're just going to have a very bad time with that, as I was trying to demonstrate.
And I also know from a very valid source that the gods themselves are non-Euclidean, so the stuff you were saying about triangles probably wouldn't have worked out.
Well, my father was a NASA mathematician, and he is the person that taught me mathematics. My family has taught each other math for several hundred years. We are not concerned with what anybody else thinks about it, and we are demonstrably very good at it. So this out there.
So wait, is your argument that hold on? Is your argument that my family is historically good at math, therefore I can't be wrong about this?
No, I'm saying that I might have learned some things that are different from you because you were likely educated in the school system and I was not.
Well, fuck me in the school system, I guess.
Well, didn't they teach you to count to 10 on your fingers? That base 10 system, that's not very useful compared to base 60. Now, is it? And that really limits a child's mind.
You know, I can't remember how they taught me how to count.
A child is going to do just fine, because base 60 might be useful in many cases, but here's the great thing about 60. Here's the magic of 60. You can take 60 and evenly divide it by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 30, 20. That's a whole lot of really useful fractions, right?
Yeah.
But divide by 7, what happens?
You get the first decimal number. What is it? 8.
So almost got to go to a decimal system all the time. Okay. It's almost like base 60 has some issues that need to be worked out. And honestly, there is a base 60 or base 12 system that we use here in the good old US of A, and it ducking sucks. The fact that we have...
It's awesome. I use it every day.
How many feet are in a mile?
A little over 5,000. What, 5,280? Something like that. That's wrong.
That's
okay.
And how many inches are in a foot, and then you can work out how many inches there is in a mile, and you realize that's a whole lot more work than the base 10 system, where it's just moving a decimal point. It's almost like
Are
we use
you
different number
a
systems, whereas we
5-year-old or
name
a
it.
caveman? I'm sorry to interrupt
Yes
you.
and
Can
no.
you repeat that, please?
Here's the thing. Sometimes a decimal system is really useful because if you are multiplying by 10, you're just moving the decimal point. It's pretty easy. So if I'm converting, say, from meters to kilometers, it's very easy. If I want to convert from inches to miles, it's a pain in the ducking butt.
Miles at this point in history don't exist. Nobody cares about a mile. What people care about is making tools.
But I'm going down the highway. I'm going to tell
and
that to the
providing
police
for their
officer when he
family.
pulls me over for speeding, okay?
I'm sorry.
Well,
Miles
at
per
this
hour
point in
don't
history-
exist, officer.
At this point in history, the cars don't exist. So that's a moot point. We're talking about how to teach 5-year-olds with the Dozenal system, or what cavemen before the Bible, the antediluvian people, understood about mathematics and what was useful to them. We're talking about
Okay, now you put up the
practicality,
word
and you're trying to make
antediluvial. So you think there was a worldwide flood in the historic past?
that is completely not the issue that we're discussing.
Then why'd you say antediluvial? Because that is literally what the word means.
I know that. I'm saying before the Bible, before biblical literature. You know, when you open the Bible and it begins with so-and-so
You said
begat, and it just confuses.
antediluvial, as in you think there was a deluge. And I'm asking if you think there was a worldwide deluge.
I don't care. And probably there were floods. And if you couldn't travel a significant distance, like you were, you know, on foot, or maybe you had a camel or a horse or something like that, then the size of your world was significantly smaller, right? Mechanized transportation has evolved our view of distance. And back then, if your town flooded, you probably thought that the whole world flooded, right? And, you know, if you're between the Tigris and the Euphrates, that's a part of the world that would flood all the time, and you would believe that the whole world flooded, because that's what river deltas do.
Okay. Justin, so I get that you believe in your God, your deistic God, and that you have a mathematical reason, because you think you're holding the cosmos in your hand. I do not. Hold on. I feel like both Aaron and I don't see how this actually proves that a God exists. So I feel like instead of relying on subjective connections based on your hand, maybe actually basing some information in actual reality, like providing some kind of evidence as to how you know that this deistic version of God either created our reality or gave us something. Like, I get that you think that holding the cosmos in your hand proves it, but what I'm telling you is that it's not actual proof. Like, it doesn't actually substantiate your claim that a God exists.
I have 833 pages of evidence to continue with it, right? So
we don't have time for that dissertation.
I understand that. That's why I'm making things very, very simple, and I'm confining it to something small. It's because I recognize that you don't have that kind of time. But briefly, let's consider 3, 4, 5 again. Now, when we take 3 fingers and we poke them into the sand, do we make a triangular shape? And can we make a square shape with 4 fingers? And can we make a pentagon with 5? So we also have the inclination of geometry in our hands.
You do realize with 5 points, you can make a pentagon whether or not you have 5 fingers? And if we're going to go with that sort of argument, then why is it the case that I can't make a hexagon, which is the bestagon?
We have much geometry in our hands, and these are clues to help us
Why is it that I can't make the hexagon the bestagon? And it is objectively the case. The hexagon is the bestagon.
Well, let's go back to 2, right? When we make the peace sign or the devil.
Hexagon. A nice, regular, 6-sided object. It is absolutely great if, for example, you play Settlers of Catan and you realize, wow, these sorts of shapes are way better than those squares we use in that silly game called chess. but I only have 5 fingers. So by the same talk you have here, I can't form hexagons, which objectively make the best board games. So why is it that I can't make the hexagon the bestagon?
If
And
you
by the
allow
way,
me,
if this sounds like I'm making fun of you, because I think this argument is absolutely ridiculous. And if you have 800 pages of this is just 800 pages of you're wasting our effing time. At no point is this even a coherent argument. It is not a syllogism. It is not evidence-based in the least. The fact you have 800 pages of it really means I think you need to start over and think, how can you actually structure this in a logically coherent, defensible way?
Given what my family has given to you in the world of mathematics, I do find that quite insulting.
You have given to me?
Let's go backwards. Yes.
What have
My name
you
is
given
Justin.
to us? This has to be like we do have to move on. We have a couple more callers to get to tonight, and I do want to go to bed before midnight. But I'm just wondering, what has your family given to, I guess, humanity? They haven't given me shit, but I'm just wondering, what has your family contributed to math?
I suggest that you Google Bernoulli family, and you will learn that we invented compound interest, which is a mathematical equation. We wrote the first calculus textbook and made calculus usable by creating integration. We also wrote the first book on hydrodynamics. There's so many inventions, I can't even list them all. But go and Google, right?
Okay,
and
so
learn
let me get
about...
this straight. Hold on, let me get this straight. So now it feels like you're deferring to an argument from authority where you're trying to establish yourself as an authority in the field of mathematics. And so therefore, because you're an authority in the field of mathematics, this argument isn't ridiculous. I feel like that's what you're saying. Like, we're telling you this is a ridiculous argument. If you have 2,000 pages of this shit, it sounds like insane ramblings of a crazy person. But you're like, but we gave you compound interest, which I'm sure everybody is appreciative for. We gave you compound interest. Therefore, this has to be correct. Is that the argument?
My family hasn't been one of the most influential families of mathematicians across the last 400 years. And I'm some kind of idiot. When I was educated by my family, everyone knows in math that we educate each other. We taught Leonhard Euler how to do math. All right? That's kind of a big deal. And I want to answer your question about the hexagon, and then you can let me go and call me an idiot. I don't care. Right? You have the devil horns or the peace sign in your hand. This is evidence of the compass and how cubit metrology was done. You know how Noah claims that the ark was 300 cubits? Well, when we extend that to our hand and we understand how things are measured, and there is no difference between a compass of today and the compass of yesteryear because it's a tool that references itself. Metrology has always been as accurate as it is right now.
Okay. Thank you for your call,
Justin. We take that compass and we spin it around, and we can make any geometric shape that we need, and it'll be mathematically perfect in any time in history.
If I take the compass and I spin it around and sit on it, will it give me all the answers to the universe? Just asking for a friend. Yeah, I know. It is vulgar. Anyways, thank you so much, Justin, for calling in. I'm not sure if I want you to call in again, but I appreciate your call. And I will talk to you later. Okay, bud?
Yeah, loser.
Oh, that's how you end a call.
All right, loser. Yes, I'm the loser. I'm not the person with 2,000 pages of insane ramblings about making your finger into a gun and finding the universe in it. Anyways, we do have
compass can make any shape. Can you use a compass on a piece of paper and make a tesseract a 4-dimensional object? No? Oh wait, I guess he just doesn't really know the math that his family allegedly put together. By the way, it is true that the Bernoulli family, absolute family of geniuses, 200, 300, 400 years ago. But as the old saying goes, what have you done for me recently? Let's put it another way. I got wonderful, smart people in my family, and I have other people in my family I feel like it might be hard to have a conversation with. just because we have the same lineage doesn't necessarily make us all mathematical geniuses. This is the same sort of BS when Trump goes around saying, I had an uncle or whatever work at MIT, therefore I'm a genius. It's like, no, it's not a transitive property.
Yeah, and I mean that's the ridiculous argument from authority he was trying to play there, and I don't know. I was very unimpressed by it, and here's another thing: we don't even know if he was like a member of the Bernoulli family. Like he calls in, just says his name's Justin, and is like, "Oh, I'm part of the Bernoullis." I'm like, "Oh, well, fuck. You know what? I'm part of the Einsteins. So go fuck yourself, I guess." I mean, it's a baseless claim. Whether or not he is part of the Bernoulli family, it doesn't mean that he's smart just because of some kind of genetic fallacy. But in any case, we do have literal a couple of atheists fallacy. On the line. Yeah, literal. We're going to go to Jason from Ohio, who has a question about the fine-tuning argument. Hey there, Jason. Thank you so much for hanging on for so long.
Hey, how's it going?
Super.
Hi, can you hear me?
Good.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I had a question. It's mostly aimed at Dr. Adair. It's about the fine-tuning argument, which I know you guys discussed earlier, but hopefully I'll ask a more pertinent question. It's about these constants themselves, the gravitational constant, the strength of the strong nuclear force, that sort of thing. My understanding, and I don't see this explained a lot, so I might be wrong, which is why I'm calling in, but my understanding is that these constants are only, quote-unquote constants that we need to measure in nature because the standard model is incomplete, rather than these constants being, fundamental to nature. Does that sound right to you, or am I off base?
There's honestly a lot of hypotheses on what's happening. Is it the case that the constants of nature can only have one particular value? So imagine some future Einstein comes along and shows geometrically that you can derive the gravitational constant from mathematical constants. So you see it's like, hey, it's just a bunch of collections of pi's and square roots or things like that. It's just purely mathematical. That is a possibility that just is not proven. Or it could be the case that there are many possible values that it could take, and why does our universe take one value versus another is then open to discussion and probably can only be answered by new physics, because the standard model doesn't have the ability to tell us what those values should be, could be. There's no reason that they can help us determine what those values are, and especially the gravitational constant, because the standard model of particles doesn't even describe gravity.
Okay, yeah, that more or less matches what I thought. And so, do we have any kind of evidence, or is there any positive reason for us to think that at least some of these constants might actually be fundamental to nature, or is it just a completely open question that we don't really have any evidence for one way or the other?
So it's going to be a little hard to say, because the funny thing is some of the constants of nature have the really weird particular values they do because of the system of units we have. So like you look up the speed of light and it's approximately 300 kilometers per second, 300,000 kilometers per second, which, is pretty fast. Yes. But physicists also use something called natural units. And it's a way that makes our calculations a bit easier. And that you realize that we can actually take Planck's constant, the speed of light, the gravitational constant, and in natural units, they have a value of exactly 1. So in that system, there is no fine tuning. It's just the value of 1. They're just the identity, and they're just unit conversion for our what happen to be seconds and meters and things like that, which are just really weird contingent things that humans came up with for historically odd reasons. But it's the case that, like, hey, why is it that various coupling constants or this sort of thing? Why is the level of interaction or like the level of mixing between neutrinos the value it is, etc.? There's plenty that we cannot yet say why they have those values. Is it possible for them to have other values? I would say probably most physicists would say something along the lines of there's some sort of physical reasoning that we get these constants, or that there's a multiverse so all the different possible constants exist. And they're pulled from some sort of bell curve of possible values or something like that. But no one has yet figured out a way to show that that's true or not. And I don't think we're necessarily anywhere close to figuring that out.
Okay, yeah,
I wish I were wrong, though.
Basically matches my understanding. Oh yeah, I mean it would be great to see some of that stuff get figured out, but like you say, it seems like we're a ways away. At least as far as I understand, you obviously know much more than I do, but.
Yeah, I do remember one thing, though. It was a paper I only very quickly glanced at over for years ago, and it was trying to give kind of a thermodynamic argument for why there are 3 dimensions rather than 2 or 4 dimensions, for example. That would be like almost like you use the second law of thermodynamics and you see what's the most probable state. I do not remember how it was argued, but ultimately arguing from some thermodynamic principle that 3 spatial dimensions is the number that would actually be most expected. But I cannot remember how good that argument was, if somebody else has refuted it, but who knows? It could ultimately be the case that there are arguments like that that could help explain why the world the way it is. But it's needs more research, more funding. Tell your congressman to continue funding the NSA and other, not the NSA, NSF.
Well, I'm in Ohio, which is quickly turning extremely red, so I'm not sure how successful that's going to be.
There are a few politicians that would listen. I know that. I was in Ohio for a while as well, and I do remember that while it's more red than it was while I was there, even Republicans want the U.S. to be successful in science.
True. Good point. I can go,
Jason,
or
did you
I
get the
did have.
answers?
Oh yeah, no, that definitely answered my question. That was what I was mostly calling in for. I can certainly hang up now, or I did have a totally separate question. I know you're trying to get through other callers, so I'd be happy to go now, or if you want, I can bring it up.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to go ahead and ask, that's fine. We've got one other caller that we're going to get to, but maybe it'll go by pretty quick. So if you want to ask your question, feel free.
Okay, so this one's actually directed to you. It's about the mythicism question. Now,
okay,
I'm kind of slightly familiar with it. The question that I have, and I haven't seen it answered. Now, I also haven't read Richard Carrier's book, so maybe he addresses it. But it seems to me that Paul is already writing in the 50s, about denouncing other forms of Christianity. So and Marcionism was around. It seems like there's all these different versions of Christianity very early on, within 20 years, and maybe even less than that of, Jesus' supposed death. And so I could see an argument where, if there was one main branch of Christianity for the first 50 years and then it broke off, I could see that evolving out of, a mythical Jesus. But to have all these different splinter versions of Christianity popping up this quickly, it seems to me like there had to be some kind of single inciting incident that would have led to this, that all these different splinter groups kind of interpreted differently. And it seems to me that the most plausible explanation for this single event would have been a popular religious leader who gets crucified, and everybody's trying to figure out what it means. Does Richard Carrier or anyone else involved in this have an explanation for this, about how there could be so many different sects so quickly?
Well, I mean, if you're looking for like a quick read and something really simple, Jesus from Outer Space is a pretty good one to start with. It kind of addresses that a little bit. I can't give you exact page numbers right now. I can tell you though that there is going to be an audiobook version of Jesus from Outer Space, hopefully soon. I'm actually editing it. I'm getting it down to the very last chapter now, so hopefully that can be out somewhat soon. I don't know if you listen to audiobooks, but for those that listen to audiobooks, that's going to be out. But basically, for me, like, I'm not trying to speak for Carrier or Carrier's work or anything, but for me personally, I would need to see evidence that points more towards a person existing to explain that than just there was an idea about the Messiah, and that idea is what sparked all the diversity. So like, what's the key piece of evidence that solidly distinguishes a physical person existing and causing all that versus the idea of the Messiah, like doing the things that he did, spawned all of that? Is there anything you can think of that would differentiate between the two of those?
It's just kind of what I was saying. It's hard for me to see an idea spawning that many different interpretations. You look at Marcionism. Is the Old Testament God the demiurge, and then Jesus comes and he's the son of the true God, and then you have Orthodox Christianity, Paul's version, and then you have different Gnostic versions of Christianity, and it's just hard for me to think that there's all these different versions in such a short time.
Right. So let me ask you, first of all, the whole short amount of time, I know Carrier in his book definitely addresses the short amount of time thing, because there's several different demonstrative examples that you could point to. Like the one that comes to mind right now is UFO cultism. Basically within 30 years, you have so many different ideas about these extraterrestrials that supposedly came. There's so many different species that supposedly exist, and there's so many different varied stories about abductions and all this other stuff. So if you just look at the UFO culture and how that spawned out of the supposed Roswell crash, I think that going back to a time when information was even far less accessible than it is like even in the 40s and 50s, I think you can see how this information could have diverged from just a simple idea existing. But aside from that, I think that the most likely explanation is if you look at how Judaism splintered into different sects. Because I mean, you agree that there wasn't just like one sect of Jews. Like it's not like there was just Jews and they all agreed on the same theology, right? Like you understand that there were multiple sects, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, the fact that, these religious groups, they diverge, and they can diverge quickly. And I think that the lack of historical evidence and the lack of actual historical things happening, I think it can only fuel the diversity and the rate at which these ideas can diverge from one another, because you don't actually have anything historical to really go back to or verify against, right? So that's why you end up with like so many different versions of Christianity and all this other stuff. And it's not until later that all the versions of Christianity kind of coalesce into Catholicism, is what it eventually, like the first organized version of Christianity, kind of turns into. And so I feel like the immense diversity of Christianity is because like I feel there's no eyewitnesses to what happened, and there's only people that are receiving these hallucinations or visions from a supposed Messiah. And so given that, you're able to just, as long as you can make up something good enough for people to believe, people will believe it. And there's a lot of crazy ass beliefs in the first century. Like I believe it was Bart Ehrman in one of his books mentions a sect of Christians that believed in really weird stories. I don't know if I want to demonetize it here, but basically Jesus did some freaky shit with Mary and a woman that Jesus pulled out of his side and tried. And this was a story told by and believed by this sect because they had these weird sexual rituals, one of which was to eat or not eat, but like retrieve ejaculate out of after copulating with your partner or whatnot. Like they were to retrieve the ejaculate out of their partner, and they had some other weird beliefs too. So I mean, you have this wide variety of people and a wide variety of sects. I just think that it's primarily because it doesn't have any kind of historical aspect to go back to. I don't know, Aaron, what do you think about this?
To address specifically what Jason is talking about, that early fast diversity, I think it's worth noting what generated that diversity. Let's go right back to the first witness to this going on, Paul. And he causes a division in the church and its understanding about keeping Torah, and this is ultimately because of his own revelations and interpretations of Scripture. No historical Jesus is needed for that. All you have to do is have people who think they're getting visions from some heavenly source and think they're getting secret codes out of the Bible. And we know this was something actively being done. Paul talks about people praying and prophesying in churches. We see that in his first letter to the Corinthians, for example. So, since you have a church built on people trying to get messages from heaven, and you don't need a historical figure to send those messages, you will expect such a thing to diversify. And if anything, the historical Jesus created in the Gospels, it was trying to basically say, hey, we need to, anchor this a little bit better, because any Joe can come along and say, I prophesied something, and Jesus says, I should get all the money. Best way to consolidate power is base it on something that can't be so easy to mimic or lead to what you might want to have. And that really seems to be kind of the history of Christianity. Lots of people having visions, weird interpretations, gospel stories getting written, getting changed, and then people claiming that these go back to eyewitnesses, so that way it solidifies power by saying this is what really is the case. So all you other folks who keep saying you got visions, you're all false messiahs, you're all false prophets, I should say. So no historical Jesus is needed for that. It's ultimately just a question of what happened approximately 30 CE, and the evidence is really ducking ambivalent.
Okay, yeah, that helps a lot. Thanks to both of you. You answered some questions that I've had for a while.
Awesome. Well, I hope that you call in again, Jason.
All right, I'll have to come up with new questions then.
All right, awesome. Well, we'll talk to you later. All right.
All right, see ya.
Bye. Oh, all right. Marathon night for calls. We are getting into our last call, but we will be addressing the $5 or more super chat. So if you would like to send a super chat, please do. We would love to interact with any questions that y'all might have on any of the topics we've covered tonight or more. I do want to say thank you so much to our call screener, Dragon. Fuck, I always fuck this up. Thank you so much there, Dragon, for doing the call screening and everything like that. You're awesome. Thank you to all of the moderators in the chat. You guys are awesome too. And thank you so much to Amargan for doing the producing tonight. I know I'm going to forget later, so that's why I wanted to do it right now. Thank you to everybody that makes this show possible. I love being on the show. Anyways, let's get to Jonathan here. Jonathan, also from Ohio. Oh, wait, I hit the button, but it didn't button. All right. What's up, Jonathan?
Hi. Thanks for staying up late to take my call. So my main question is, I've been listening to this show for a few months, and I've had a very religious upbringing. I used to read the Bible for an hour a day, every day, all that stuff. And just watching the show, I think I have the information that, in my mind, I think I've been convinced that God doesn't exist, just based on a lot of the arguments that people use and listening to the discussions with the host and theist. So I think I'm there from a logical standpoint, but I have noticed that I just can't bring myself to admit it. I guess because most of my identity is wrapped up in Christianity and being religious. So I think, I guess if there's strategies, if there's a discussion around disentangling yourself from that as an identity, and some general strategies, and because a lot of the beliefs that Christianity advocates for, a lot of the assumptions about human nature, that's kind of still built into my brain, even though I know some of them might not be correct. An example of that would be the meritocracy how I've heard the arguments for meritocracy not being right, but there's the whole like Jordan Peterson, oh, it's so complicated. And I just can't like break out of that because part of me thinks that, oh, it's so complicated, we just don't know. And because I'm like a straight white man who has an upper middle class upbringing, I haven't had the experiences to like make that not true to me, even though like you kind of get what I'm getting at. It's like there's logic, but then there's like the visceral assumptions I have that's kind of been built up in some of my identity, and I guess like strategies for disentangling that. Does that make sense?
I don't know. Aaron, do you have any thoughts? I think I'm a little confused as to what the hang up is. Is as far like, is there any way that you could summarize it maybe in a sentence for me?
I think the hang up is that I don't like I know the information is there, but I can always talk myself out of it because, oh, it's complicated, so I can talk myself out of it. Because I think one of the things was said is that you have these beliefs, and you can always like for the God claim, it makes like all the logical arguments make sense to me. And like I would be tricking myself not to do it, not to accept that it's true. But then there's always the, oh, if I die and I was wrong, that's pretty scary, right? And then similarly, like, oh, if the world didn't work how people said they did, like, I don't know. Maybe that adds more color to it, or maybe I'm just rambling.
I'm interpreting what you're saying, and please correct me, Jonathan, but it really sounds like that you're having kind of a crisis of this pillar of what you believed has fallen. What else can I actually follow on? What else is actually a solid structure? Or is everything about to collapse? That's kind of what it sounds like to me. Am I interpreting you right?
Yeah, I think you are, because like, there's a comfort in the certainty of it, and a lot of my comfort I like took from that certainty. And I know the world is really complicated, and it's like I know it's better to like dig into the complexity of it. But I guess just like disentangling myself from trying to oversimplify things to like put myself in a comfy state of mind, So I guess you're pretty right on like how to jump ship, because yeah.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I am not the least bit qualified to give psychological advice, but we have helped fund an organization, Recovering from Religion, which has people that you could talk to that might be able to, with actual clinical training, help discuss these sorts of things, at least far better than I would be able to. I'd feel really uncomfortable giving psychological advice. The best I can say is to reach out to those who are good at doing that. And yeah, the world is a complicated, scary place. And the thing that makes it possible to move through is the people we interact with, care about, and support each other. That's really the best way we can get through every day because, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't necessarily know what's right and wrong. The best we can do is try to hold on to those who we care about.
Yeah, and I would just echo what Aaron is saying here by contacting the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They can really help. There's also Recovering from Religion. Sorry, not Freedom from Religion Foundation, but Recovering from Religion. They have a lot of great services there. They've actually got a call-in line where you can call and you can talk to somebody, and they can provide some over the phone help, but they can also connect you with people local to you that could help you out depending where you're at. They have a lot of great resources there. I know for me, as far as moving past religious belief, it was not exactly a light switch, but I just took a careful look at my beliefs, and when I couldn't substantiate like what I believed in with actual evidence in reality, that's when I kind of shed it. And that is the point where you got to figure out a lot of things for yourself, which can be scary. But I feel like understanding, for me at least, primarily for me at least, understanding that like there's only what we can control, and we don't like there's no overarching God figure that is making things happen. For me, that was a little bit of a relief, because I'd grown up thinking that, oh, I did this one bad thing, and so now God is punishing me, or like God is punishing me for this, that, or the other. Me personally realizing that God wasn't doing that, and that there wasn't somebody that was constantly judging me, that lifted like a whole lot off of my shoulders and allowed me to, I guess, move past it, I guess, a little bit. But again, specifically, that's what I experienced as far as like leaving the faith, and how I coped with no longer having a faith in a God. So I don't know if that would help or could help, but I can guarantee you that the Recovering from Religion Foundation can definitely help you out with it.
Okay. Yeah, that might be a more appropriate form for me to ask those type of questions. I think one example that came to mind when you were explaining that is that, like, the idea of there being no control, like where marbles flying around the jar, But I think some of the belief, an example of a belief would be like, oh, if something bad happens to you, it's because God is like sending you a message. That's like a pretty big one for me. So that kind of goes to like extreme personal responsibility. Like if I mess up or something, it could always be going back to something I did. That's like an example of like a psychological effect or an assumption about the world that I know logically it's just chaos, but I just can't, like it's always me, That's an example of like an assumption about the world that is still drawn out, just like it not being religiously connected anymore.
I mean, I totally understand what you're saying with that, because when I was in high school and even after high school, I felt the exact same way. I felt like, God was sending me a message by one thing or another, or anything of that nature. Like I felt like God, like I had been taught that God talks to you through just the natural happenstance things that happen. And so if something bad happens to you, you're being punished and all this other stuff. And for me, realizing that that's not the case actually made me feel better about things, because it's like, I got into this car wreck, but that's not punishment, because I don't insert anything that you consider to be like a sinful deal. Because I had premarital sex. It's like, God's not punishing me for that. It's just another happenstance accident. Like accidents happen, kind of thing. Like it's not because I had sex before marriage, kind of thing. And so like that, just I guess I'm tapping a little bit into my own therapy that I've been through. Kind of running through that every single time I feel that anxiety, or I did feel that anxiety about like my perception of the world, and like, oh, this bad thing's happening, why is it happening to me, kind of thing. Like I go through logically in my head, like, okay, this isn't some kind of like punishment for anything. These are things that just happen, and that's, there's no reason as far as like transcendental reasons as to why this bad thing happened. Just sometimes shit happens. And so like in the moment, like going through that, reassuring myself about those things kind of helped, I guess, deprogram me from the way that I did think when I was religious. And so like, constantly running that exercise is what helped me kind of eventually get to the point where I wasn't concerned about all that. I don't know if my experience has helped or explain anything or anything like that, but I could definitely tell you the Recovering from Religion Foundation will definitely be able to tailor, their advice to exactly what you're going through.
Well, thank you. I think something kind of related that I wanted to touch on too, if you don't mind, is
Sure.
I think something that was said in some of the previous conversations tonight was the idea of like you have your conclusion that you want to go towards, and then you're selectively picking evidence based on trying to go to that conclusion. So like, part of that is like, so there's like science, there's a lot of science out there. Like I believe in climate change, for example, but I don't understand why I believe in it. And I understand there is like a mountain of evidence. But I think part of me is having a hard time telling the difference between there's a mountain of evidence, like all the science, and there's a mountain of evidence for God. Look at all the whole universe stuff there is and all the coincidences. So I think part of it might also be like, is my thought process of trust me, bro, applicable? Like that's kind of like not the best. Like I know that's not the best way to do it, but for like really complicated issues, like climate change or like societal level issues, it feels like that's a very similar line of thought. I guess, what do you think about that? Maybe that's not specific enough. I guess it's more like.
No, I think your example is a pretty good one because more often than not, it makes sense to follow the consensus of experts on some sort of subject because they have the background knowledge, they have the ability to test the hypotheses, they probably have tried kicking the wheels of the hypothesis themselves, so they know how rigorous it ultimately is. But there are also, say, a consensus amongst astrologers, and that's a bunch of bullhucky. How do you tell the difference? I would say a big thing is when it comes to, say, a scientific consensus, is that you can see that the various scientists all actually even agree on what the evidence is, what the theory is, and can all basically consistently explain what makes it convincing. You go to the religious people and you get a whole barrage of different arguments and explanations that are mutually not coherent with each other. People who say, well, it's from religious experience, and then you find out there's a huge diversity in religious experience. Like, not everyone sees the Virgin Mary. Not everyone sees. I actually don't know if Muslims see Muhammad or what they might see in visionary experiences, but nonetheless, instead of there being like everyone agreeing on getting to the same sorts of things, you see the sort of diversity you would expect if there really isn't an underlying thing that's actually aligning together. So, but as you say, there's also a mountain of evidence that you have to go through every time, and drilling through any one mountain could take a lifetime. So, at least as a short stop, more often than not, expert consensus is the way to go. And if you drill in and see that, hey, these experts don't even agree on what the facts are, then you might have a reason to think that there's something to be skeptical about.
I think, yeah, that makes sense. I guess, like for all really complicated things, my understanding is that they like run statistics, and there's probably like an error term. Like there's a piece of the data that cannot be explained, and then there's like p-value magic that happens. But I guess maybe I don't know. Maybe I have to like circle back on that. Yeah, I guess there's no statistics with religion because the data is all qualitative, and you can just kind of retrofit anything. So maybe that's like another comment that's true. Yeah, I don't know. That was helpful. Just your explanation of that there. I should probably, maybe I will contact that organization because I feel like I'm getting a little rambly. But I think just talking it out to someone that doesn't have like a stake in my social life has been helpful. So thank you. Yeah.
No problem. And the line is always here for you to call in if you want to bounce ideas off of us, anything like that. But I feel like most of the hosts here probably aren't going to try to, give you a lot of, I guess, what would be like therapeutic advice. That would be recovering from religion. They know how to, really give you the good advice that you need. But if you need to like bounce ideas off of, that's perfectly what we're here for.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Well, sorry if this is not the appropriate forum, but you gave me some resources. I'll probably listen back on this. And I think that's all I had to say, so thank you so much. I know it's getting late as well.
You're welcome. I appreciate you calling in there, Jonathan. We're gonna go ahead and drop you now, but I hope that you call in again.
Thank you. Have a good night. Appreciate you.
No problem. Good night. Yeah, appreciate you too, there, Jonathan. Bye. All right. Well, that's all of the comments. Went a little bit longer than really it normally does, but hey, we had some really great callers. I just want to remind everybody about the schedule that we got tomorrow. Tuesday, we got Chew Gun with Arden, Hart, and Stacy. That's at 6 p.m. Wednesday at 6 p.m., we got the Hangout with Matt Dillahunty and Mandisa Thomas. On Thursday, we've got Takis with Arden, Hart, and Josie. And that's at 2 p.m., by the way, Takis is. And then Sunday shows at 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., we've got Matt Dillahunty and Eric first, and then Aron and me on Sunday. And then next Monday on SkepTalk, we've got Erika with unknown guests so far. But in any case, I think that we're going to be getting to the super chats, maybe, potentially.
The super chats want to come out, I can tell.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of final thoughts there, Aaron? I'm sorry, I kind of took over there right at the end.
No, that was perfectly good, especially because you had an experience that you could share. And all I could say is reach out to the people who can be. I think that's the best we can possibly do, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Recommending the good therapeutic help from recovering from religion is probably the best for the first question that they had. So. I do believe we're trying to get the super chats worked out here. Hey, I know what. Everybody go to patreon.com/call the line and become a member so you can get, that podcast as well as a lot of other perks. That would be helpful. There we go. All right. First up, we've got $10 from William Matz. Where are you? Where's our flying cars, you two? Why do big physics and big engineering not want us to have this?
Honestly, it's probably good we don't have flying cars. Have you seen how bad people drive on the road already? Now they can fall out of the sky? Whew, you're in trouble. And to be more serious, it would be energetically way more expensive to take every single car and have to also lift it into the sky to fly around. We're already talking about an energy crisis as it is. This would just make it 10 times worse. So in some ways, I'm kind of glad we don't have flying cars. And I guess that means only the billionaires get to have them. But what should happen with billionaires is another question. All right. $5 from Etna Inson. And I am really going to double apologize for getting the first and last name mispronounced. Dr. Adair, what are your thoughts on an infinite regress to the past as opposed to a necessary first cause? Many theists don't think it's possible. I honestly don't see why there's any logical problem with an infinite causal regress. To me, it would say like it's somehow logically impossible to have infinite numbers go back indefinitely. I don't see why there has to be a most negative number. That doesn't seem to make sense. In the same way, I don't see why it's necessary to claim that, and all the attempts to show it's absurd fall apart upon further analysis. Though, to fully understand it, there's all these paradoxes that happen with infinity, which are interesting in their own right.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of theists, whenever they make an argument for God, and they start shit talking infinite regresses, I feel like they're a little bit hypocritical, because typically when they make those arguments, they specially plead that God is eternal, right? But I feel like there's an inherent infinite regress in God being eternal. So it's like they're again specially pleading, like, oh well, infinite regresses can't exist except for my special one that can exist, but only because I guess it's magic. That seems to be the issue that I have with their hypocrisy on those arguments. $5 from William Matz again, saying, is Charlie from Has-Been Hotel a Nephilim as the daughter of Lucifer and Lilith? Maybe. Who knows? Let me check my palm. That's not the Charlie one, but
unfortunately, all I can think of is Charlie the Unicorn. Okay, maybe we don't want to bring that meme up today. Okay, $5 from the Raven 200. Make sure to consensually give that like button the best and roughest cheek slapping it ever had. Blackheart. Jimmy, go get stuck in a room with me rapping.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter says, but here's the real question: if Jesus is an amalgamation, what is the plural of Jesus Christ? Christ's? Jesus is Christ? Jesse? Mesidea?
Well,
so
I mean, I need to triple check, but I think Jesus in Hebrew isn't declinable, so it won't have a plural form necessarily, but I will need to pause before I go in there. At the very least, it's probably not going to have the Latin plural of Jesi.
Jesi, not Jesse. I got it. Jesi.
All right. Is this you or me? I've lost track. Oh, no, it is me.
Maybe
it is me. Yes. $4.99 from the gayest husky. I must play putt-putt with Anubis's butt. I say what in the butt? I say what in the butt? I'm confused.
I got that meme reference. $10 from Screen Names Cause Problems. Great episode. Thank you so much from Screen Names.
All right, we got $10 from Get Stanfield. Again, I apologize for every single name ever said by me. Is it accurate to say that the Big Bang was a conditioned space and time of inflating and not necessarily finite? So, going to take a moment to interpret this. So, there's disagreement on what Big Bang even necessarily refers to. In the original idea that the Big Bang would refer to like that singularity point all the way at the beginning of the observable universe's history, or if it's the general expansion of the universe from some indeterminately small point, not necessarily infinitely small. And then this is like several minutes of big banging going on. Inflation very likely is a part of the process, but a lot of the details are yet to be determined and conclusively proven one way or the other. And as for the finitude, it's a big question mark. Could have been a universe before ours. Maybe somehow it wasn't. This is still open question for research.
$5 from Jeff Cochran saying, continuing my campaign to rename the problem of gratuitous suffering as the problem of diarrhea. I mean, if God exists, why diarrhea? I have to agree.
I would say even more so the problem of diarrhea that actually can lead to death, because many people have died because they get sick and they have diarrhea to such an extent that they dehydrate and actually pass away from that. So yeah, that's quite the problem. Five pounds.
Oh, sorry.
I
It's
think
your
it's me.
turn.
Yeah. So 5 pounds from Darren Lacey. Given the recent Trump guilty verdict, so you fear any riot/violence a la January 6th? I am very reluctant to make any predictions. I hope not, but let's say this much. On January 5th, I was not predicting what happened on January 6th. I'm very reluctant to then predict what some people might do based on the legal process that completed last week.
I am hesitant about about a lot of things. I think that the November election is definitely set to pop something off. Probably. I mean, last time Trump lost, they tried to storm the Capitol and replace our government. This time, I feel like we have Trump literally saying that he's going to change the face of the government forever if he gets elected. So if he doesn't get elected, I feel like we're going to have some stuff go down. Whether or not it's successful, I mean, that's kind of up in the air, I guess. But if Trump gets elected, I feel like that's the worst situation because he has pledged a number of things that would effectively culminate in establishing America as an autocracy. From the things that I've said him publicly say, it seems like in order to accomplish those things, he's promising an autocracy. And that seems to be what people want him to do. And so I don't know if it will actually happen, but at least that seems to be his intent by the things that he wants to accomplish. So I feel like it could potentially get pretty bad here later in the year, but like I said, we'll just have to see. $5 from William Matz, who says, "Boobies!" And I agree, boobies.
Good subject. Okay. We got $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Justin trying to ride a 400-year-old dead relative's coattails is hilarious. I want to know what he thought of indigenous land rights or reparations. Yeah, that seems to be an interesting counterpoint. If the accomplishments of our ancestors are to make us great, the crimes of our ancestors should definitely make us stop for a minute, at least.
$9 from Squidward Q Sagan saying, Dr. Adair, what the fuck is the cosmic microwave background radiation? Love you both. Excuse me.
So approximately 13 billion years ago, God was trying to make popcorn. So that's the microwave project. Okay, more that in the early universe, that the universe was stupendously hot and you couldn't even have neutral atoms. You could have basically electrons and protons stick together and not just fly apart. And because of that, you have ions there, and this actually made it so the universe was opaque, that the free path that light would try to travel would be unsuccessful. It would keep getting blocked by all these ions in the way. But as the universe expanded more and more and cooled down, eventually it would be the case that you could finally form atoms, that electrons and protons could form up and not just be ripped apart again instantly. And once that happened, then the light that was originally forced to basically be bouncing around in this cloud of plasma could then begin to travel freely, and that is the afterglow that we call the cosmic microwave background. The reason we say it's microwave is that when we try to measure it, it's at that range of frequencies. It's at that level. And yeah, that's the basic meaning of where it comes from and why it has that name.
All right, $5 from Jonathan saying, "Great show today. Going to bookmark this show and go back to every once in a while." Thank you so much, there, Jonathan. I don't know if that's the same Jonathan that called in earlier, but yeah, definitely bookmark it.
It's the same spelling, and it's a less common spelling, so I think so. All right, so we got $5 from Rich and Dies. I think when people talk of what happened 2,000 years ago, there was no reliable communication at all. People speak in terms of today's world. it is the case that, yeah, the past is a foreign country. People do things differently there, as the old saying goes. But I think it's fair to say that there was also reliable communication. Pretty hard for the Romans to have an army if nobody knows how to talk to each other, to put it one way. But then, yeah, we're coming along, we're imposing our ideas when we're trying to translate these old texts, these old ideas, and put it into modern parlance. And yeah, things get a little bit lost along the way.
All right, $5 from Squid Super Hunk. Hello, you are all great. Keep being great. Oh, I will.
Nope.
I mean,
No can do. Not going to happen.
Obviously, my demeanor in this and across a couple calls tonight have showed that I will continue to be great.
We got $4.99 from Rosin Apophenia Sufferer Keller. All right. And again, as I've said before, names mean no good. Jordan Peterson is a God of the Gap supporter. Well, that kind of depends on what you mean by Jordan, and what you mean by Peter, and what you mean by son, and what do you mean by is, and supporter. You got so many words that we just need to define there. And I don't honestly know what he argues so often. And I have to give props to Alex O'Connor, who had a interview with him, and I have to say Alex's ability to speak to him goes well beyond what I could have done in the same circumstance. I do not know if I could have possibly talked to him in the way that Alex did, so elegantly and on point and unflappingly. I know I would not have succeeded doing that. So please give Alex O'Connor some love for being able to do that with people that we disagree with.
Yeah, I loved how he handled Jordan Peterson. And then $4.99 from Rosnia Apophenia Sufferer Keller says, does that mean Dr. Adair doesn't think Planck scales are actual limits?
Well, let's put it this way. We don't know what happens once we get down to that level, and I'm not going to stick my head out and say I know what can or can't happen at or below that. We don't know, and I definitely don't know. And so I'm going to just say maybe, maybe not. Future physics to be determined. Please fund your local scientist. We got $5 from Blackwater Ted. Who's your favorite atheist author? I love the writing of Drew P. Bowles. I have to admit, I don't know that author, and how to answer this question, that's a hard one as well. John, what do you think?
I do not know. Well, so my favorite atheist author, it's really hard to, I guess, pick one. I mean, I feel like this might seem like, oh yeah, of course he's going to say this, but I mean, I think that Richard Carrier has a great blog. Like if you're interested in like the historical reliability of Christianity, if you want to, know more about some of the more classical arguments for theism and all that kind of stuff, like his blog is a great resource to use. And I'd say that he's probably the one that I am more prone to read, although he's not the only person that I've read. Like behind me, I've got a whole bookshelf full of books that I've read. David G. McAfee, he's a great author too. He's got a lot of great books out there. And there's a plethora of them.
And I guess if you were to force me to have an answer to that, just thinking in terms of like physics, then I might want to point to the late Victor Stenger. Wrote a lot of really good physics and physics religion books. First book I remember reading by him, and I think it was before I even entered grad school, called The Comprehensible Cosmos. And that one was eye-opening for me, even in terms of just the physics knowledge, let alone the implications for the fine-tuning arguments and things like that. Stenger has been gone for a while, but his books are still very much worth reading.
And then $4 from Rosnia Epiphania Suffer Keller. I really hope we get our cosmic neutrino background detector up soon. The CVB should give us a look at the universe around 380,000 years before the CMB. That sounds interesting.
I know there is work to try to be able to detect neutrinos that the problem that I mentioned before about light not being able to travel through the early universe because it's a plasma, neutrinos would have basically looked at that and said, I got this, bro. Neutrinos go through stuff like they're a literal ghost particle. Neutrinos can go through a light year of lead and basically be like, that was nothing, bro. So if we can build a detector that can say, hey, this is a neutrino that likely emerged earlier than some nuclear process after recombination, that would be awesome.
$5 from Richmond Dies. Well, last one. Doc, can you talk about time as a fabric and plane and not a linear line? I read about this hypothesis.
Well, the thing is, space and time are kind of mixed up because of what that Einstein guy had to say, and it's not even necessarily a line. The thing is, space and time can get bent, and they do get bent by objects with mass. So, for us, the path is not straight, but the path that the object follows along is called a geodesic, which is basically a fancy term for saying a straight line from some other point of view. Like with the shape of the Earth, if you try drawing a line on there of the path you would take, it would look like a curve. But on the surface that you're actually drawing across there is actually the shortest path between 2 points, and so it's a line in that geometry. So let me just read this one more time. Oh, that maybe time itself isn't linear. Like maybe it somehow like loops back around on itself. I don't know, and I don't know enough about the hypothesis that suggests that, other than like cosmic bounce models that are now much less favored because of what we know about the expansion history and likely future expansion of the universe.
And then I believe this is the last one that we got right now. $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Also, happy Pride, my LGBTQIA plus friends, neighbors, co-speciesists. You are all loved. Y'all are respected, and I'll fight for you if needs be. And then subsequent rainbows. Thank you so much there, Monkey at Typewriter. And totally echo that for everybody. All right. Well, that's going to be our show for tonight. Like I said, thank you so much to Dragon for doing the call screening, Margan for doing the production and everything. And make sure everybody, either become a member or visit the patreon.com/call the line and help us support the channel here. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Aaron, for pairing with me yet again. I had a good time last time, but this time we had so many calls. I'm so glad that you were here with me.
It's always fun to be here, but one of these days we're going to have to do what Forrest does and make this a 5 or 6 hour event.
I don't know about that. I don't know if I'm an old man, so maybe we'll have to see. Anyways, all right. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and I guess we will see you heathens later. Oh, our mods in the chat. Thank you so much to the mods in the chat. Everybody do the Trump.
No can do. No can.